Ghost in the Shell is a huge multimedia franchise, beginning with the original manga, published in 1989, and continuing through several more manga installments, as well as movie adaptations, TV series, novels, short stories, even theater plays, all the way up to the upcoming, or current, or not even current anymore, depending on when you're watching this video, anime adaptation in 2026. Just as the net is vast, so is Ghost in the Shell itself. My fascination with the series started back in the late 90s, as I stood in a Suncoast video, attempting to convince my dad to buy a VHS copy of the original film because of its reputation, which I'd read about in AOL chat rooms, online reviews, and scattered message board posts, about how the film was a mind-expanding tour de force of advanced animation, high-concept science fiction, and deep philosophical musings. It wasn't because of the anime titties on the front cover, Dad. As with any popular franchise, video games were inevitable. There are, in total, 8 Ghost in the Shell games. However, only 3 of these games are easily accessible, with the rest either defunct because of online servers being shut down, or practically lost media at this point because they were released on Japanese cell phones or exclusively in arcades. So I'll look at as much as I can here, while also diving into the wider Ghost in the Shell media, specifically the original manga and films, as well as the standalone complex timeline. But we're also going to talk about some of the later Ghost in the Shell projects. Oh yeah, those ones. So, make yourself comfy, because we've got a lot of Ghost in the Shell to discuss. In the world of Ghost in the Shell, cybernetic enhancements have become the norm, to the point where much of the population have undergone cyberization. The lines between human and machine are blurred. Cyber hacking, illegal prosthetics, and information warfare are the most prominent crimes, affecting both social and political spheres of influence. At its core, Ghost in the Shell follows the investigations of Public Security Section 9, a fictional, elite military intelligence division of the Japanese government. Its members are, for the most part, heavily augmented with cybernetic enhancements. Their leader, Major Motoko Kusanagi, is a full cyborg crammed with classified and, in some cases, illegal modifications that make her adept at both combat and cyber warfare. Other members include Bato, another full cyborg and the unit's second in command, specializing in field operations, Ishikawa, an information specialist, Bulma, a weapons and explosives guru, Saito, the group's sniper, Paz, an investigator, and Togusa, another investigator handpicked by the Major from the local police force. Togusa is the team's rookie and its least augmented member. All of these are code names, by the way. Their real identities are never revealed. The last true members of Section 9 are the AI-controlled machines known as think tanks. In the original manga, they're called Fuchikoma, and their banter not only provides a lot of comic relief, but also comments on some of the series' wider themes of individuality and the definition of humanity. They're all under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Daisuke Aramaki, who acts as their operations leader, as well as liaison in the political spheres of the Japanese government. The team deals heavily in counter-terrorism operations, as well as internal governmental and corporate corruption. As per the Cyberpunk Manifesto, there's not much distinction between governments and corporations in the world of Ghost in the Shell. Kind of like how there isn't any more in the real world. Ghost in the Shell was created by Masamune Shiro, real name Masanori Ota. Shiro is an interesting figure. Unlike many artists in the manga industry, he operates as something of a lone wolf. Most established manga artists have an assistant, or small team of assistants to help them with tasks related to layout, background art, etc. Some have whole studios that can pump out designs in that artist's signature style. But for his entire career, Masamune Shiro has never made use of assistants, and prefers to work in solitude. Of course, he still has editors, publishers, a team surrounding him in the operational sense, but when it comes to the art and storytelling, Shiro works entirely on his own, hunkering down in his studio, creating dense, politically complex, philosophically sophisticated works. or indulging in his love of lithe, oiled-up women and hulking, mainly dark-skinned male figures. You see, Masamune Shirow has, for pretty much his entire career, had one foot in the hard, sci-fi, cyberpunk-inspired sagas of works like Black Magic, Dominion, Appleseed, Orion, and of course, The Ghost in the Shell, and the other in the ecchi world of illustrated softcore and hardcore porn, with his Pieces art books and Galgrease series. There are overlaps between those two worlds. His more mainstream works aren't shy about showing off some skin, and some of his pornographic work has excellent sci-fi, horror, even Wild West settings and designs. The Ghost in the Shell manga originally had a 2-page explicit scene that was eventually cut from later releases of the series. There's been some conspiracy theories set forth by fans over why it was cut, but from what I could find, it was originally edited out of the North American run by publisher Dark Horse, but they would later include the pages in an uncensored 2004 release. However, in 2009, according to Japanese publisher Kodansha, Shiro requested the scene be removed, and he even redrew a panel on a previous page to ease the transition between the scenes. Kodansha has stated they would have left the uncensored version alone, but it was the author's request that the material be altered. So, make of all that what you will. I have the 2017 Kodansha fully compiled edition, which has the edit, and the 2002 Kodansha bilingual comics version of the first book, which is uncensored. So, hey. But to return to the main point, Ghost in the Shell seems to be the culmination of a lot of ideas and themes Shiro was toying with in his other sci-fi works throughout the 80s. Some might even consider it his magnum opus. Others might say Appleseed. But that's a debate for another time and place. Ghost in the Shell actually has 2 titles in Japanese. Originally, Masamune Shirow wanted to call the series just The Ghost in the Shell, a reference to the 1967 philosophical work The Ghost in the Machine by Arthur Koestler, and also a title that perfectly captures one of the major themes in the story. What defines humanity in a world where certain people are fully cyberized? Is it the presence of a soul, referred to in-world as a ghost, inside a metal shell? Can a machine also develop a soul? However, Koichi Yuri, one of the planning coordinators at Young Magazine, where the manga was serialized, wanted a Japanese title. So Shiro offered Kokaku Kidotai, but requested The Ghost in the Shell be included as a subtitle. The Ghost in the Shell also retroactively became the title of the first story arc. What does Kokaku Kidotai mean though? If you try typing it into any online translator, even partially, they'll just spit out Ghost in the Shell, which is not even close to being correct. To break it down, ko is attack, kaku is shell or husk, kido means mobile or quick to respond, tai is a regiment or squad, kidotai, together, is the phrase used for riot police, or the riot squad of a police department. Kokaku, together with these kanji, is not a commonly used phrase. It's something Shiro made up to incorporate his shell idea into the Japanese title. A literal English translation could be attack shell riot police, or, if you want it to sound slightly less awkward, armored riot police. If you want to get really fancy, mobile armored riot police has been used, or just armored shell or shell squad. All of those translations sound awkward in English, so it's easy to see why the English phrase Ghost in the Shell was way more appealing. And I feel like Shiro knew that, which is why he went for such a bland-sounding name in Japanese. It was never his idea to give the series that title. The Ghost in the Shell manga is split into 3 story arcs. The first, The Ghost in the Shell, follows Section 9 through several different investigations, but the one that rises to the top as the most significant revolves around the mysterious hacker known as the Puppeteer, referred to as the Puppet Master in other adaptations, and the fallout surrounding that investigation. The second story arc, Human Error Processor, is a series of mostly self-contained short stories that follow the normal cases that Section 9 pursues. For those familiar with the standalone complex series, think of this arc as a bunch of standalone episodes all lumped together. The third arc, Man-Machine Interface, takes a complete left turn and focuses on the Major, now working freelance after the events of the Puppeteer story, and delves into concepts of spiritualism and godhood related to technology. And let me tell you, if you're someone who's read or watched anything Ghost in the Shell related and found it hard to follow, you ain't seen nothing yet. Man-Machine Interface is out there. Anyway, we'll look at the manga in more detail as we go through the other adaptations in the franchise. Ghost in the Shell is kind of unique in that the original storylines have never actually been directly adapted in any form. The various films and TV series have taken elements, sometimes even specific scenes, from the source, but they usually repurpose and recontextualize them to fit their own narratives. Each adaptation also slightly alters the timeline of world events and the backstories and personalities of its characters. The original manga, despite having a very dense, complex plot with weighty narrative themes, is underpinned by an exaggerated art style and plenty of humor. Some people who come into the franchise from the more serious-toned films or TV series have a hard time reckoning this tonal shift, but I feel like it's one of the things that makes Ghost in the Shell so fascinating, these varied moods across different media, the way its characters are all slightly different in each version. And not to go full-on meta with this, but it kind of fits with the themes of identity the franchise explores. Like most manga, the series is mostly in monochrome, but there are lots of full-color spreads too. Man-Machine Interface has entire chapters in color. One cool thing is whenever the color pages are ending, the color gradually fades out of the panels before transitioning completely to black and white. It's a neat little detail. Another interesting thing about the manga is Masamune Shirow's heavy use of footnotes. These are not only explanatory notes that give details on some of the technological and political jargon that crops up in dialogue, they also offer commentary or asides about certain themes or concepts in the story. Adding another layer of complexity to these footnotes, sometimes they're clearly Masamune Shirow, the author, speaking to you, the reader, which is easy enough to grasp. He'll talk about the layout and art of certain pages, why he chose to depict things the way he did, as well as his storytelling choices. Sometimes he'll give recommendations for books and articles he read that informed some of his narrative ideas. Other times, the footnotes seem to portray Masamune Shirow as the narrator, separate from the author, existing solely within the world he's created, to the point where the line between fiction and nonfiction gets blurred. For example, early on, during an action sequence where the Major chases a subject through crowded streets, a footnote breaks up the scene where he ponders the definitions of right and wrong. And I quote, "In reality, might usually makes right, but there are those who, in reaction to this bleak reality, believe in the opposite ideal, that might shouldn't make right. In trying to enforce their ideal, however, might or force often becomes necessary, thus showing how difficult it is to put ideals into practice." Also, in talking about what is right or just, whether it's groups or individuals, Muslim society or Christian society, etc., their different concepts of what is right lead them to view each other as evil. It makes the whole concept of right or wrong feel rather antiquated. If a consensus of the majority is all it takes to determine what is right, then having and controlling information becomes extraordinarily important. Who is talking here? Is it Shiro or an entity inside the world of the story? You could justify either answer. The strange footnotes, detail-heavy, jargon-filled dialogue, complex to the point of veering into the realm of convoluted storytelling, all of it combines to create this overwhelming sense of information overload, which I feel is very much intentional. It's like your attention is constantly being split and diverted. Sound familiar? Okay, so I think it goes without saying, but from this point on, there are going to be spoilers about everything Ghost in the Shell. You can use the chapter select to jump around to different parts of the video, depending on what things you've experienced, but if you've never experienced any of it, you might want to think about doing that before continuing with this video. So anyway, let's get into it. 1995 saw the first adaptation of the Ghost in the Shell manga with the animated film of the same name from director Mamoru Oshii. Oshii is another interesting character in Japanese entertainment, and also a huge influence on the tone and style of future Ghost in the Shell adaptations. Many consider him something of an auteur who cut his teeth on several arty, surreal, and philosophically complex works throughout the mid-80s, stuff like Angel's Egg, Labyrinth Property File 538, and Gosenzo-sama Banbanzai. I love Mamoru Oshii's stranger, more avant-garde work. Maybe someday I'll talk more about him, but for now, what brought him more mainstream critical acclaim was joining the production team for Mobile Police Patlabor in 1988. Patlabor is my favorite mecha series. It's more down to earth, but at the same time goofier than your Gundams and your Macrosses, although Macross can get pretty goofy. It is about pop music saving the galaxy after all. Freaking love Macross. But anyway, the Patlabor films really developed Oshii's more politically and technologically driven interests. 1993's Patlabor 2, written by frequent collaborator Kazunori Ito and directed by Oshii, is a moody, dense, multi-layered political thriller that marked the beginning of his more serious filmmaking style. A style he'd hone even further in 1995's Ghost in the Shell. The film loosely follows the puppeteer story arc from the manga, here translated as The Puppet Master. Masamune Shirow gave Oshii free rein to change the story any way he saw fit, so he and writer Kazunori Ito chose specific plot elements and reworked the film into a much more focused and condensed version of the narrative. It drops all of the sillier elements from the manga, as well as the Fuchikoma think tanks, which, as much as I miss them, I agree wouldn't fit into this more serious interpretation of the world. The film also expands on the political and philosophical musings in the original story. Section 9 begins with the assumption that the Puppet Master is a high-level hacker, capable of ghost hacking, or in other words, controlling people's cyberbrains, forcing them to do the Puppet Master's bidding most of the time without their knowledge. The Puppet Master is able to accomplish this by implanting simulated experiences and false memories into that person's mind. The most emotionally resonant scene in the film is one where a normal garbage man finds out he's been ghost hacked and duped into a criminal scheme. I think anyone who's ever written an article or made a video about this movie talks about this moment, but that's because it's so damn good. So yeah, of course, I'm going to talk about it. And the setup is what makes the payoff hit so hard. We follow two sanitation workers on their route through the city. As one of them collects the garbage, the other is on a public phone, finding access cards taped to the bottom of the terminal and passing them through a swipe point, transmitting whatever data is on them to somewhere. The man explains to his partner that he's ghost hacking his ex-wife to find out why she's asked him for a divorce. She won't talk to him anymore, except through her lawyer, and he's been barred from seeing or even speaking to his daughter. He attempts to show his coworker a photo of his little girl that he keeps in his pocket, but the other man brushes him off. According to the soon-to-be divorced man, he met another guy at a bar who gave him a barrier-breaking program that, when used piece by piece through different public terminals, becomes untraceable. However, Section 9 is tracing these hacks, because in reality, the program is being used to ghost hack government officials in an attempt to discover state secrets. Neither the garbage man nor his accomplice planting the cards has any idea of what they're actually doing. After a confrontation with the Major, which makes for one of the more haunting action sequences, as the Major uses her thermo-optic camouflage to fight in a shallow expanse of water, it's revealed the man planting the cards has had his entire memory and identity wiped, implanted with a fantasy about being a political revolutionary. Meanwhile, the garbage man, arrested and brought in for questioning, is devastated to learn his wife and daughter are complete fabrications. He's lived alone in a dingy single-room apartment for the last 10 years. And that photo in his pocket of his little girl, smiling like an angel, according to him, is revealed to be just a photo of himself. The juxtapositions in this scene are what make it so powerful. The stark blackness of the interrogation room, the cold fluorescent lighting, the equally cold facts from Ishikawa regarding the details of the man's real life. The tears that spill without an accompanying cry from the man's eyes, the shattered expression on his face. Togusa's gentle explanation that these memories of a fake wife and daughter, even though not real, will never truly be forgotten, like a dream that will haunt this man's waking life forever. The Major and Bato watching from the other side of the interrogation glass. And all of this accompanied by the minimalist, atmospheric soundscape of music composer Kenji Kawai. It's incredible. I mean, everything from the moment the two garbage men are introduced to this final cap on the entire series of events is just some of the most brilliant storytelling, period. It's insane how good this is. And the 2017 live-action film, which at times tries to do a shot-for-shot remake of some of these moments, completely fucks it up. But we'll talk about that later. The interrogation room scene is also in the original manga, but it's much more abridged, and is undercut by a joke at the end with the garbage man going back to work and his coworker commenting that, well, at least now you don't have to worry about a divorce anymore. In the film, there's more of an autobiographical element to the whole thing as well. It's unclear when, but at some point in Oshi's career, he went through a divorce and wasn't able to see his daughter for years. I'm sure upon reading The Ghost in the Shell during the pre-production phase of the film, Shiro's story of a garbage man with an implanted memory of a life with his wife and daughter, a life that now, in the cold light of reality, is just a dream, rang especially true for Oshi. Oshi's always had a keen eye for cinematography and animation. His earlier films are filled with scenes and shots where the camera, for lack of a better term, is placed inside buildings, looking out on characters through windows. He uses warped and distorted filters, such as looking through a bottle filled with water, a surveillance camera screen, or mirrors. He also loves shots of characters watching other characters. And Oshi employs all of these techniques and more in Ghost in the Shell, highlighting its themes of surveillance and information gathering. Another trope Oshi is fond of is long montages of cityscapes, often accompanied by atmospheric music composed by Kenji Kawai. These moments are prominent in almost all of Oshi's films, and the Major's sea bus ride through Newport City in Ghost in the Shell is one of his best. At one point, the Major catches a glimpse of herself sitting in a cafe window, a jarring moment that you could interpret as another metaphor for identity. And that's valid, but there's also a footnote in the manga that explains the Major's prosthetic body is from a very generic and widely available production line. This is clever camouflage to hide the fact that inside she's loaded with several military-grade and classified cybernetic parts, the idea being that she'd be less of a target in the outside world for thieves and hackers. Another haunting scene that directly precedes the sea bus ride and directly follows the interrogation room moment is one where the Major uses a flotation device to dive into the harbor. If it weren't for the diving suit, her heavy prosthetic shell would sink to the ocean floor. And we get these incredible images of the Major rising to the surface, where the division between water and sky are obscured, followed by a philosophical conversation between Bato and the Major where she likens diving, specifically resurfacing, to being reborn into another self. On its own, not the most original metaphor, but when combined with a discussion concerning their government-sponsored cyberization and how that changes their humanity and individuality, it takes on another layer. Throughout the course of Section 9's investigation, it's revealed this master hacker they've been chasing is not a person, but a rogue program created by the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. As this program itself explains at one point, while in a hijacked prosthetic body that's been run down on the highway and recovered by Section 9, it is not an artificial intelligence, but a sentient being born from a sea of information on the net. Whether this is true or the delusions of a rogue AI is up to your own interpretation. This all culminates in a showdown between the Major and a giant tank in an abandoned atrium on the outskirts of the city, as members of the Foreign Ministry's Section 6 attempt to reacquire the body the Puppet Master has taken control of. Another mesmerizing action set piece that climaxes with one of the most copied images in anime history, of the Major's body breaking apart while attempting to pry the hatch off the enemy tank. It's not quite up there with the Akira bike slide, but it's in the top 5 at least. The Major then attempts a brain dive into the Puppet Master, which begins another trope Oshii's known for, these expository scenes near the end of his films where the antagonist's motives and philosophies are revealed. Oshii always imbues these with an otherworldly atmosphere, at times even creating visual tapestries that separate these conversations from the reality of the film itself. In Ghost in the Shell, it mostly takes place through the Major's perspective, which has been hijacked by the Puppet Master. Her consciousness has been placed in its body, while its consciousness has been swapped into hers. It offers her the opportunity to merge and become a new life form, to evolve beyond the program known as the Puppet Master, or Project 2501, its codename, and the woman known as Motoko Kusanagi, also a codename. It's unclear at first whether the choice is made, as snipers from Section 6 attempt to eliminate both targets to clean up their mess. But at the end, we find out Bato managed to recover the Major's cyberbrain and implant it in a body he was able to acquire in a hurry from the black market. This scene opens with the Major reawakening to consciousness and viewing herself through a reflection in a mirror in another room. A visual metaphor for something the Puppet Master said to her before their merge, that they are more alike than she realizes, like a mirror image of one another. Bato offers to let her stay at his safe house for as long as she likes, but the Major says she has to go. She also confirms that neither the Puppet Master nor Motoko Kusanagi no longer exist. She's become something new, combining the Puppet Master's powers and the Major's memories and humanity. The manga storyline ends in a similar way, but the events leading up to it play out differently. In the manga, there is no climactic tank battle. The Major manages to brain dive into the puppeteer, as it's translated in the manga, in a car prior to Section 6 arriving on the scene. They interface, and the Major wakes up in a Section 9 lab, having learned that the program, codenamed Project 2501, disintegrated during her brain hack. The story continues with the Major botching an operation, and somehow the details are leaked to the media, leading to a lawsuit and political pressure to have her kicked off Section 9. The whole thing's a setup, and she and Bato hatch a plan to clear her name. But this also goes awry. It turns out the puppeteer has been lying dormant in her cyberbrain, and she finally accepts its offer to merge, leading to that final scene in Bato's safe house, but with the Major's cyberbrain housed inside of an adult body instead of that of a child's. But I think the child body is meant to reinforce the fact that the Major has been freed from her life in Section 9, where the government owned her, both mentally and physically. Her shell was literally government property, her thoughts and actions monitored, even broadcast between team members. This is a rebirth, a fresh start as a new being. The net is vast. The puppeteer's storyline is incredibly interesting, and its ending and turn of events heavily influence the direction of the rest of the story. I mean, I guess that would go without saying. But even in other timelines of the series, where the puppeteer isn't mentioned, this idea of the Major becoming something new or leaving Section 9 always seems to be a plot point that crops up, is the point I'm trying to make. Ghost in the Shell is one of the greatest films ever made, and it's surprisingly short at 1 hour and 23 minutes, but it's perfectly paced with incredible action scenes, plenty of intrigue, and most importantly, tons of atmosphere and room to breathe. Not every character gets time to shine in this one, but the structure is almost perfect. Oshii would continue this timeline of events with another film, simply titled Innocence, in 2004. But before we get to analyzing that, there's a video game we need to talk about. Ghost in the Shell is a third-person mecha shooter released for the PlayStation 1 on July 17, 1997 in Japan. A North American release would follow in December, and Europe would get their hands on it in 1998. It was developed by Exact, who at this point were best known for their breakout Jumping Flash series. first-person platformers where you take control of a robot rabbit, or Robbit as the game refers to it, shooting and hopping your way through colorful 3D stages. For an early 3D game on the PlayStation, Jumping Flash is still highly playable today. There are a lot of cleverly designed elements that make controlling the Robbit pretty intuitive, and they're still some of the best examples of first-person 3D platformers around. After the second Jumping Flash game, Exact developed Ghost in the Shell, at the behest of Sony and rights owner Kodansha. And this game didn't stray too far outside of their wheelhouse, because in it you play as a new Section 9 recruit piloting a Fuchikoma, the team's robotic think tanks. Despite coming out shortly after the release of the 1995 film, the game bases its art direction and overall tone on the original manga, utilizing character and mech designs by Masamune Shiro. One thing I gotta bring up is the misinformation on the Wikipedia page for this game. There's this paragraph where someone wrote that the concept of the Fuchikoma came from the scene at the end of the film where the Major fights the tank. And I quote, "Based on this tank design, mecha creators Shoji Kawamori and Atsushi Takeuchi made a smaller version designed for one person that would be used by the police." No they didn't. First of all, the Fuchikoma are in the original manga, as small, one-man tanks used by Section 9. Second, Shoji Kawamori and Atsushi Takeuchi were mechanical designers for the film, but they didn't work on this game. And thirdly, the design of that tank was inspired by the Fuchikoma, in a nod to them since they weren't included in the 1995 film. Get your shit together, Wikipedia authors. The in-game cutscenes were animated by Production IG, the same studio that handled animation duties for the film, and would go on to handle animation duties for every iteration of Ghost in the Shell moving forward. But here, the more kinetic and cartoonish style of the manga shines through. However, like the original manga, there's still a healthy dose of hard sci-fi and cyberpunk aesthetic imbued into the world. That's apparent right from the get-go in the game's introductory cutscene, which also features some thumpin' techno. In fact, the entire soundtrack plays with different techno stylings, and is one of the highlights of the game, with tracks by Takeo Ishino, Derek May, Meek Van Dijk, Advent, Westbam, Joey Beltram, Brother from Another Planet, BCJ, ScanX, Dave Angel, and Hardfloor. Beyond the cutscenes, the game itself looks fantastic for a real-time 3D game on the PS1 from 1997, with colorful, easy-to-identify backgrounds and enemies, buttery smooth frame rate, and one of the most memorable things about the gameplay, the ability to climb on virtually any part of the environment, even ceilings. The game engine just smoothly transitions between these different perspectives, with a camera that sticks right with the Fuchikoma. It may take a bit to get used to the perspective shifting shenanigans, but it works and it's super impressive. There's a training mode that concludes with a boss fight, making it sort of a mini mission of its own, allowing you to get accustomed to the controls. I don't know this for sure, but the game engine feels like a modified version of Exact's Jumping Flash engine, which would make sense. Something about how tight the camera is and how smoothly the stages and environments move around reminds me of the look of those games. The Fuchikoma is incredibly easy to control. D-pad to move forward, back, and turn left and right, L1 and R1 strafe. Pressing L1 and R1 together, along with either up or down, allows you to glide. X jumps, square fires your machine gun, rapid press to continue firing, while holding square will lock on with up to 6 missiles when enemies are within range, in accordance with a lock-on gauge at the bottom of the screen. You have unlimited bullets and missiles, but a limited supply of area-clearing grenades, which can be fired with the circle button. You can hold up to 3 grenades, and ammo pickups can be found scattered around stages. A map on the bottom right keeps track of enemies and stage objectives, and a gauge around that tracks your health. Once you get the hang of the controls, the Fuchikoma is incredibly versatile. Skating around, scaling buildings and other structures, hanging off of ceilings, you can get really creative with how you explore levels and dodge enemy fire. It's fast-paced, arcadey, and just a blast to play. There are 12 stages, each of them unique, with equally unique objectives. The first places you in a large outdoor industrial area, tasked with destroying 4 enemies that each hold a key code needed to access a large warehouse. You only need to destroy those 4 enemies to progress, but in the course of tracking them down on your minimap, you'll also fight soldiers and other mechs of varying strength and weapon loadout. Other stages have you defusing bombs. By blowing them up, of course, surfing on the bay in a sort of rail shooter segment, traveling down the highway in another rail shooter segment, which actually has a branching path, changing the enemies in difficulty. You'll also track down a target through the city who's using optic camouflage, scale a building through large ventilation shafts. I don't think there's a bad mission here. Even the sewer mission is fun thanks to the easy-to-navigate level design and how awesome it feels being able to make use of walls and ceilings to dodge attacks in tight spaces. There are a couple moments of frustration, like this section in the final mission where you need to jump between these tiny platforms. The Fuchikoma is much lighter and floatier compared to Jumping Flash's Robbit. The camera also doesn't helpfully point downward to assist you in judging your landing. I can't tell you how many times I died at this part and had to restart the mission because I kept missing or falling off these platforms. Even on my second playthrough, having grown much more accustomed to the Fuchikoma's movement, I still died like 4 or 5 times to this section. Luckily, all the stages are pretty short, taking around 10 minutes or less to complete. Each stage ends with a boss, and though they also have a lot of variety in terms of their designs, the majority of them boil down to circle strafing around the arenas and unloading with machine guns and lock-on missiles. Maybe the occasional grenade when things get a bit dicey. The more interesting bosses were the second stage one, in the sewers, where you fight in this cylindrical tunnel, skating all around, avoiding its lasers and flamethrower attacks. The other was a reactor core, where you need to destroy several terminals while avoiding and taking out these laser-firing arms. It also has an attack where it will drag you towards its force field protected center, and touching the force field damages you, so you need to keep dashing away. It's kind of annoying as you're learning all the ins and outs of the fight, but once you understand it, it's actually really fun and one of the most memorable parts of the game. The final boss is also really cool, having 2 phases. One where you're fighting on top of a building, which you can fall off of, as the boss becomes increasingly more unstable and erratic as you pile on the damage. The second part is a short, timed phase where you continue to fight while free-falling off the building. You need to destroy it before the timer expires, otherwise you'll presumably hit the ground and smash to bits. As for the story, it doesn't take up much of the game's roughly 2-hour runtime. There are about 6 minutes of animated cutscenes, with the rest of it being told through mission briefings, but essentially, Section 9 is on the trail of a terrorist group known as the Human Liberation Front, after the group attacked a Megatech Body Corporation building. The Megatech Corporation are the supplier of Section 9's prosthetic bodies and cybernetic enhancements, so the case hits close to home. As they come into contact with the group, they discover their leader is a man codenamed Zebra 27. Their investigation leads them to their base of operations, a large tower called Aeropolis 2, belonging to Megatech, that houses a nuclear reactor. Ishikawa also learns that the Energy Ministry is interested in Zebra 27. An official named Sawamura has been leaking information to the terrorist leader. After passing through an underground city and into the geofront below the tower, the team shut down the reactor and face off against Zebra 27 on the roof. After defeating him, while free-falling down the side of the building, the team find out that the whole thing was because of a defect in Megatech's reactor. Sawamura planned to collect bribes in exchange for covering up the problem when one of the reactors blew. That was the building explosion from the beginning of the game that launched the whole investigation. To cover up their negligence, Sawamura and Megatech made it look like a terrorist attack. However, Zebra and the Human Liberation Front sensed an opportunity and stepped in to take over the reactor in Aeropolis 2 and extort money from Sawamura. But now everyone is either dead or arrested, and Megatech's negligent nuclear safety protocols will most likely be swept under the rug, kept secret from the prying eyes of the media and public.
Everyone wants a piece. It's all greed. He went too far when he notified Section 9 and claimed responsibility.
And ever since it all started, I've lost several nights of sleep.
I had no idea you were such a sensitive fella.
Well, at least it was a good training exercise for the rookie. You've got a good head on your shoulders, but you shouldn't rely so much on the Fujikomas for protection. You'll catch on with practice.
She's strict.
She's sounding more like Chief Aramaki.
So, someone's talking about me.
Okay, let's begin drop training, shall we?
It's a complex plot for such a little game, and it's a bit difficult to follow thanks to the fact that we don't get to actually see any of the story's antagonists. They're only talked about, but hey, the animation is cool. And the game itself is a lot of fun. A short but sweet 3D action game on the PlayStation with a lot of neat mechanics and solid gameplay. An excellent first entry in the Ghost in the Shell game collection. Chronologically, the next piece of Ghost in the Shell media is the first season of the TV series Standalone Complex, which aired in 2002. However, as I said earlier, Oshii followed up the first Ghost in the Shell film with a sequel. Kind of. We'll talk about that. Anyway, Innocence wouldn't release until 2004, but I think it's best to skip ahead here a bit to finish out this early era of the franchise. Standalone Complex starts its own separate timeline, so we'll group most of it together in the next section of the video. The sequel to Ghost in the Shell was both written and directed by Mamoru Oshii, dropping his longtime screenwriter Kazunori Ito. And even though this is a continuation of events from the first film, Oshii was careful not to market it as Ghost in the Shell 2, at least in Japan. In the West, it was marketed that way because, why wouldn't it be? But I kinda get Oshii's reasoning for not wanting to attach this film too closely to his 1995 critical darling. Innocence is a very different beast. Ghost in the Shell was focused on the more militaristic actions Section 9 engaged in, while still offering several moments of downtime to dwell on headier themes. Innocence, on the other hand, is all headier themes and more languidly paced, with a noir detective aesthetic. From the darker color palette and moodier atmosphere to the replica 1940s era vehicles everyone seems to drive around in. It doesn't feel like it takes place in the same world as the first film, or anything else in the Ghost in the Shell franchise. But I feel like this is very much intentional, and probably why Oshii didn't want to call it Ghost in the Shell 2. And though it was sort of lambasted by critics and fans at the time of its release for being so different, it honestly follows in the tradition of the Ghost in the Shell manga. Man-Machine Interface, the final original story arc, which itself was marketed as Ghost in the Shell 2, is a radical departure from what came before it. Instead of chronicling the adventures of Section 9, Man-Machine Interface follows the Major, here referred to as Motoko Aramaki, who now works for a company called Poseidon Industrial. She's investigating a terrorist attack on a pig organ farming facility owned by Meditech, a subsidiary of Poseidon. This entire storyline is just a pretense for diving, excuse the pun, especially considering all the oceanic and network-based themes in this story, into the more philosophical elements of the series. Motoko Aramaki is actually one of many Motokos that have been dispersed throughout the net after her union with the puppeteer. She herself has become a life form that exists in both the physical and cyber world, able to download her consciousness into multiple shells that she keeps ready and waiting around the globe for whenever they may prove useful to her. Right from the get-go, Man-Machine Interface has a different tone as we join Chief Aramaki and Bato during a visit to a temple where they meet with a psychic investigator named Tamaki Tamai from the Japanese government's channeling agency in an attempt to track Motoko's movements, setting the stage for the more spiritual themes that will dominate this story. And this channeler is a framing device for the entire narrative. The idea being that she is somehow connecting to Motoko and watching what she's doing throughout the story, relaying events to Aramaki and Bato. At least that's what I think is going on. Psychics and channelers were briefly talked about in earlier parts of the manga, but they're such small mentions that it might have flown over the heads of most readers. Visually, narratively, atmospherically, and probably several other adverbs, this story is so totally different that Masamune Shirow himself speaks up in a note titled Apologies and Corrections on the title page of the book, and I quote, "In the Ghost in the Shell graphic novel published in 1991, the heroine, Motoko Kusanagi, fused with a self-described intelligent life form and left Section 9 of the Public Security Bureau. This story takes place approximately 4 years and 5 months later. As a result, this story is quite different from what was originally called The Ghost in the Shell, and featured Public Security's Section 9, the Special Assault Force. I thought of visually differentiating the new Japanese title from the old one by merely changing the last kanji character, from one that means military unit to the homophonic kanji for body or form, which would shift the meaning of mobile force or riot squad to something like mobile unit body entity. But for a variety of reasons, I decided not to do so. To those readers expecting a direct continuation of the prior storyline, I apologize and beg for your understanding. I'm sorry, folks. Masamune Shirow." We'll return to more details about man-machine interface a bit later. For now, let's talk about innocence. I feel like Mamoru Oshii could have written the same foreword for his sequel film. Instead of focusing on Motoko though, Oshii chooses to invert Shirow's manga sequel and follow Section 9 and the aftermath of the Major's disappearance. Its story follows Bato and Togusa, who are paired up to investigate the Locus Solus Corporation after several of their gynoid robot dolls have gone berserk and committed murders. And honestly, this buddy cop dynamic feels like it's partially inspired by the stories in Human Error Processor, the manga's second story arc. Only there, Togusa is partnered up with another team member named Azuma, and Bato's off doing his own thing. In Innocence, Bato has grown more withdrawn and quieter since the Major's disappearance, after she merged with the Puppet Master at the end of the first movie. He also has a dog now, a basset hound named Gabriel. Oshii himself is known to be a lover of the breed and often puts them in his films, especially from Patlabor 2 onward. I can't remember if there's one in the first Patlabor movie. There's a tie-in novella to Innocence called After the Long Goodbye, written by sci-fi author Masaki Yamada, which is a prequel of sorts to the events of this film. In the story of the novella, Bato is involved in a car accident that may not have been so much of an accident. When he returns home, Gabriel is missing, and the novella follows Bato's search for his furry companion, whom he believes has run away to find Bato's missing soul. Bato spends a lot of time soul-searching throughout this story, wondering if he actually possesses a ghost at all, or if all of his thoughts and feelings are nothing more than noise created by an artificial brain. It also delves subtly into his unrequited love for Kusanagi, which he never fully admits to. A lot of the stuff Bato encounters while searching for Gabriel is bizarre. Old homeless men fighting tanks, Yakuza racing dogs who chase rabbits that are downloaded into their heads. It's a surreal and fantastical look at Bato's character. Pet owners will probably get something extra out of it from that side of the narrative as well. By no means is it necessary reading to enjoy or understand the film Innocence, but it's a cool little bonus. It was translated into English, but that, as well as the Japanese original, are long out of print, which is really unfortunate because it's a fascinating book with an incredible atmosphere. Anyway, back to the film, once again. I keep going on these tangents. I think it's because I find Innocence hard to talk about. It's much more of a vibes kind of thing compared to the technical storytelling and filmmaking proficiency of Ghost in the Shell. I remember when I first saw Innocence. I didn't dislike it, but I definitely didn't feel the same visceral hold that the first movie had over me. The more times I see it though, the more I fall under its spell. Innocence is more dreamlike and symbolic. Much like Man-Machine Interface, its main plot is more of a pretense to explore its themes and characters. Though it's punctuated by some very well done and intense action sequences, the movie is also perfectly comfortable just existing in really mundane moments. Like riding along in cars, sitting with either Bato or Togusa, or Bato and Ishikawa, as well as following Bato as he shops for dog food or cleans dog piss out of his blankets at home. Oshii's love for cityscape montages returns, as does Kenji Kawai's atmospheric soundtrack. Visually, the film combines CG backgrounds and animation with traditional cell or digital 2D animation. I'm not sure if they were still using cells on this movie. It makes for a unique look, and I feel like most of it holds up pretty well because of the overall art direction. The dialogue gets a bit heavy-handed thanks to an over-reliance on allusions and quotations. Quotes have always been a thing in Oshii's movies, but there were usually only one or two, and they were central to the plot. But here, characters will sometimes speak to each other in quotations, trading them back and forth. No one talks like this. And I get that it's sort of reinforcing the film's heightened sense of reality, but it still comes off as a bit pretentious at times. There are a few cool set pieces throughout Innocence. One is Bato being cyberbrain hacked and going berserk in a convenience store. He shoots himself in the arm a few times and narrowly avoids blowing the head off the store owner before he's saved by Ishikawa. In his own mind, he saw himself being attacked by several figures in the store, and the way this scene is put together makes it seem like Bato is acting in self-defense, until you find out what's actually going on and realize how vague everything that came before really was. The other memorable scene is when Bato and Togusa head to the home of a black market weapons dealer and hacker named Kim, who proceeds to trap the two in a logic maze, where they keep repeating the same actions of entering the mansion with different details and outcomes. Bato manages to break free thanks to the Major's intervention and helps Togusa out as well. Speaking of the Major, she's absent for most of the film, but her presence is felt throughout. From Aramaki's concern that her disappearance has psychologically impacted Bato, to Bato's own melancholic shift in personality. She haunts him. And funnily enough, in reality, she is sort of haunting him, watching over from the net, finally appearing at the end of the film when Bato infiltrates Locus Solus's secret headquarters, a floating warship stationed in international waters. She downloads her combat capabilities and a portion of her consciousness into one of the many gynoid dolls that act as a defense mechanism on the ship. There, Bato discovers that these dolls are actually being ghost dubbed, a procedure where real people's ghosts are duplicated into the inanimate dolls using real girls kidnapped by the Yakuza, part of a human trafficking ring. Wealthy individuals and politicians purchase gynoids with real young girls' ghosts implanted into the dolls. This is a slightly altered version of the self-contained ghost dubbing story that appears in the first story arc of the manga. A Locus Solus worker who discovered the Yakuza operation tampered with the ghost dubbing procedure, giving the young girls more control and causing the dolls to murder their owners, in the hopes that police would intervene and discover the truth. This employee was found murdered by the Yakuza earlier in the film. Bato points out that along with the psychologically damaging effect this whole situation had on the human girls who were kidnapped, it was also damaging to the gynoids who had corrupted ghosts dubbed into them, causing them to violate one of Asimov's laws of robotics, that a robot should never harm a human. This further expands on the franchise's questions of whether artificial life forms possess ghosts. With Locus Solus exposed and the mission complete, the Major bids farewell to Bato, exiting the gynoid she possessed, returning to the net. Bato visits Togusa, whose family has been watching over Gabriel while he's been out gallivanting with the Major on a warship off in international waters, and Togusa gives his daughter a birthday present, which, of course, would be nothing other than a doll. Sort of a tongue-in-cheek ending to this whole affair. Innocence sure is a movie. I don't know, it's very strange, and I can totally understand how some people would not be down with what it's doing, especially if you go into it expecting a straight sequel to Ghost in the Shell. It occupies this weird space where it both is a sequel and isn't. It continues plot threads and themes from its predecessor, but forges off in an entirely new direction. I think it's great, and gets better with repeated viewings, and an understanding that this was created to be something different. And as I said earlier, it sticks with the spirit of the original manga. Just to wrap that up, man-machine interface culminates with the revelation that Motoko Aramaki, who we've been following throughout the story, is the 11th isotope. or clone, or offspring, to put it more simply, of the being that resulted from the fusion of Motoko Kusanagi and the puppeteer. That was the puppeteer's goal, to disperse itself throughout the net. The original Motoko has been researching silicon-based life forms as a possible next step evolutionary being to follow on from mankind, furthering the transhumanist themes of the story. Much of man-machine interface takes place within cyberspace, and a lot of the dialogue is Motoko shouting out jargon-filled commands to her little digital assistants as she performs corporate espionage. What she's ultimately doing is tracking down blueprints for silicon-based life left behind by a Professor Rahampol. Several of the Motokos come into contact with one another near the end. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure what happens at the very end, but it seems that the Motokos somehow achieve or touch upon the creation of this new silicon-based life form. And the channeler, Tamaki, who has linked into these communications, has somehow been psychically wrapped up in all of this. The final panel shows a tree of life like electrical current in her eye that mirrors some of the imagery seen earlier on. Has this new life form been born within her? I don't know. Man-machine interface is very weird, and very hard to follow. There are a lot of philosophical discussions related to dualism, which, to boil it down, is the idea that the mind and the body are separate entities, as well as the Buddhist concept Jizaiten, which, according to Shiro's footnote, is a temporal and spatial concept of the structure of the universe. It is represented by the image, or more accurately, the reflection in the spirit realm of 3 tree, or forked structures called sansagi. There are 64 strata of irreversibly ordered elements that move in precise sequence about the 3 trees, and one full cycle of their movement is equivalent to the life of the universe. It's certainly one of the more unique concepts to come out of the human brain. Well, yeah, can't argue with that. You see what I mean, though? You almost need multiple doctorates in philosophy and Eastern mysticism to even understand the foundation he's building this story on. It is fascinating, but it's here where I'm going to have to call upon the comment section to really dig into the nitty-gritty of the symbolism and larger ideas here. The story is intentionally ambiguous and open-ended, and Shiro's footnotes do nothing but pile on to that ambiguity. So I've outlined the larger plot, but as for what it all means, hey, you can read it for yourself and decide. For the most part, this wraps up what I'll refer to as the original timeline of Ghost in the Shell media. There is one last piece, which is a short story collection aptly titled The Ghost in the Shell, 5 New Short Stories, that was released in 2017. Unlike the Innocence tie-in novel, this one is still available both in print and digitally. As the title states, it's 5 short stories written by To Enjo, Gakuto Mikumi, Kafka Asagiri, Yoshinobu Akita, and To Ubukata. The 2 To's, Enjo and Ubukata, have been involved in Ghost in the Shell adaptations, with Ubukata writing scripts and credited for series composition on Arise, which we'll talk about later, and Enjo credited as scriptwriter and series composition on the upcoming new Ghost in the Shell series. And Enjo's story, the first in the book, about a point-of-view character who doesn't realize he's only a machine, is one of the best in the collection. So that's good news for the new show if he's in charge of series composition. This guy gets Ghost in the Shell. Anyway, this whole short story collection is excellent, so if you're a fan, definitely look into it. But now, let's rewind a couple of years from Innocence's release back to 2002. We've got a whole other timeline of Ghost in the Shell media to explore with Standalone Complex. Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex is a 52-episode television series split between 2 26-episode seasons. The first aired between 2002 and 2003, with the second in 2004 to 2005. These seasons were aired on North American television between 2005 and 2006. It was also broadcast in the UK, Australia, Southeast Asia, India, South Africa, probably Antarctica too. This show was everywhere. Compilation OVAs for both seasons' main story arcs were released in 2005 and 2006, followed that same year by a made-for-TV movie called Solid State Society. Standalone Complex also received its own short-lived manga adaptation, a handful of novels and short story collections, a PS2 game, a PSP game, a few mobile games, an online MMO shooter, a follow-up CG animated Netflix series, along with a bunch of other supplemental materials and various paraphernalia. It's safe to say that if Standalone Complex isn't the most popular entry in the Ghost in the Shell franchise, it's certainly the most prolific. Developed from the start as an alternate take on the established Ghost in the Shell manga and 1995 film, Standalone Complex was directed by Kenji Kamiyama. Kamiyama was a protege of Oshi's, working as a writer and then animation director on the Oshi-penned projects Blood the Last Vampire and Jinro the Wolf Brigade. He also directed the short series Mini Pato, a comedic spin-off in the Patlabor franchise. And we've already touched on how heavily involved Oshi was in Patlabor. The art of Standalone Complex is less realistic than the 1995 film, but also not quite as exaggerated as Shiro's original manga. Though Shiro did have a hand in early mech and character designs. He also provided ideas for stories and approved the scripts. Standalone Complex finds its own art direction to set it apart, though it does borrow heavily from man-machine interface for its depictions of cyberspace and communications. The disc-like video images of team members speaking to each other through cyber-brain communications and visualization of hacking and barrier-breaking programs are taken directly from the last story arc of the manga. The other highlight of Standalone Complex's presentation is the music. Kenji Kawai's soundtrack for the 1995 film is a tough act to follow, but if anyone was up to the task, it was Yoko Kanno, the composer behind such classics as Macross Plus, The Vision of Escaflowne, and of course, Cowboy Bebop. She has the uncanny ability to inhabit different genres and make them sound authentic. For Standalone Complex, she trades the jazzy, bluesy, funky stylings of Cowboy Bebop for snazzy techno, hard-hitting rock, somber strings, and two of the best opening theme songs in anime this side of Tank, with the first season's Inner Universe and second season's Rise. Both just incredible tracks. It's hard for me to choose which one I prefer, so I'll take them both. Both performed by Russian-Japanese singer Origa, who unfortunately passed away in 2015. Even though Standalone Complex is set in a separate timeline from the original manga, it still adheres to several backstory elements, and fleshes out some details of the world that are only touched on in the manga. For example, the TV series takes place in the year 2030. The capital of Japan has moved from Tokyo to Newport City in the newly redistricted Mihama Prefecture after nuclear attacks during either the Third or Fourth World War, yeah, two of them happened sometime earlier in the 21st century, devastated the old capital city and several other regions of Japan. These two world wars saw a huge shakeup in geopolitical power dynamics. The United States split into three separate entities, the most prominent of which is the American Empire. Japan has become a world superpower thanks to their development of new nanotechnology that helped mitigate the radioactive fallout from nuclear attacks during World War III. This micro-machine technology came to be known as the Japanese Miracle. After World War IV, also known as the Second Vietnam War, Japan saw a huge influx of Asian refugees. This refugee crisis plays a central role in the second season's plot. Standalone Complex digs into the larger Ghost in the Shell world, but still leaves a lot of the details of these events up to the viewer's imagination and interpretation. And I like that. It's great to learn more about this world, but it doesn't go out of its way to over-explain everything. Standalone Complex also brings the think tanks into animation for the first time. Well, first time in a full animated adaptation. They were included in the animated cutscenes for the PS1 game. Here, they've been redesigned and renamed from Fuchikoma to Tachikoma. Apparently there was some rights issue, possibly with the video game, over the Fuchikoma name and design, but I couldn't find any details about this. Anyway, the Tachikoma play a much larger role in Standalone Complex, and even star in their own post-episode miniseries called Tachikomatic Days, where they comedically explain various aspects of the world or ponder their own technological development and existence. It's a lot of fun, and some of these mini episodes get a bit out there. The title, Standalone Complex, refers to a phenomenon where similar actions performed by many people seem to be connected in a conspiracy or organized movement. However, when examined individually, it's revealed there is no connection between people or events, and finding a specific origin or originator is impossible. This is what differentiates it from copycat behavior. Usually, in a copycat incident or crime, the original perpetrator is widely known. The concept most closely resembles memes, where the original creator of the thing is almost impossible to trace, and doesn't really matter. The important thing is its meaning and what it represents. The term was created by the writers of the series, but it draws from several real-world philosophies, like French philosopher Jean Baudrillard's simulacra and simulation, especially the concept of a copy existing without an original. Also, Japanese sociologist Masashi Osawa's idea of social theory, where the internet and social networks form a sort of collective consciousness, causing large numbers of people to think and act similarly without any real connection or communication between each other, as well as American philosopher Frederick Jameson's concept of the vanishing mediator, where the leader of a movement disappears or becomes obsolete because the followers have taken up the cause on their own. Think the entire plot of Fight Club. Each iteration of the Standalone Complex series looks at this concept from a different angle, from a symbol fighting for social change, to a refugee leader sparking a revolution, to a network put in place to rescue abused children and care for the elderly, to cyberized humanity reaching a technological singularity. Standalone Complex offers many lenses through which to view its philosophy. Each season of Standalone Complex has a unique structure. In the first season, the episodes are broken into two categories, standalone and complex episodes. Makes sense. Standalone episodes are, as the name suggests, self-contained storylines that expand on some aspect of the world or the characters. These are some of my favorite episodes. Personally, I don't think there's a weak one in the entire first season, so it's really hard to pick highlights, but I've tried my best. Like the second episode, where a weapons designer, who's already died, uses an accomplice to place his cyberbrain inside one of the tanks he's designed. His motive ends up being a personal one, rather than terrorism, and the ending is pretty heart-wrenching. Or the next episode, where several androids are committing suicide, prompting a Section 9 investigation into these specific obsolete models known as Jerrys. They discover a virus is to blame, created by the son of a Canadian ambassador, who fell in love with his android. This leads Section 9 on a manhunt and reveals the virus had given the Jerry models personalities trained on dialogue and storylines from old movies. Episodes like these dive headfirst into the ethical dilemmas related to technology that Standalone Complex loves to explore. Others focus on specific characters, like a Bato-centric one where he's sent undercover to investigate a former boxer, current military combat instructor, suspected of leaking information from a US naval base. Bato idolized him when the man was competing in the Paralympics years ago and refuses to believe the boxer is the suspect they're looking for. Yet another involves Aramaki and the Major's trip to London on official business, where Aramaki breaks off to take care of some private affairs. Wink wink, nudge nudge. But ends up a hostage during an armed robbery. Then there are episodes related to a subplot involving the Tachikoma and the rapid advancement of their AI and the development of their individualism. The Tachikoma are supposed to be a single hive mind-like AI. Even though they each participate in separate Section 9 assignments and operations, at the end of the day, their memory data is shared among each unit, which, in theory, should make them all the same. However, it's revealed that despite the centralization of their shared experiences, each Tachikoma is developing its own unique personality. One in particular seems to be advancing more quickly than others due to the fact that Bato chooses it for his missions every time. Each Tachikoma is meant to be unassigned to any team members. On top of that, Bato uses natural oil on this specific Tachikoma's internal components, instead of the synthetic standard the rest of the Tachikoma receive. Hints of this hindering its performance are shown throughout the season, and the growing disparity between the Tachikoma causes the Major to become concerned about their effectiveness as combat tools. During one episode, Bato's Tachikoma breaks out of storage to explore the city on its own. Along the way, it meets a young girl who is looking for her lost dog. While searching an open market, the Tachikoma stumbles upon a cyber brain for sale in a junk shop, which it steals. It turns out the cyber brain belonged to a filmmaker who was never well known during his lifetime, but his goal was to make a film so entertaining that audiences wouldn't be able to stop watching. This is a reference to David Foster Wallace's 1996 novel, Infinite Jest, where a film so entertaining that people are unable to stop watching, leading to their eventual death, is circulated for nefarious purposes. Well, that's one of the many plot lines in that novel. Standalone Complex features several other references to film and literature throughout both of its seasons. But anyway, the larger issue here is the Tachikoma's increasingly advanced AI. During a later episode, the Major makes the decision to send them back to the lab for analysis. This causes them to be disarmed and shipped off to other non-military workplaces. The Tachikoma subplot will eventually connect back to the overarching story of the first season, told in the Complex episodes. This story deals with a super hacker known as the Laughing Man. It all started several years ago. The CEO of nanomachine manufacturer Serrano Genomics was kidnapped, and several days later held hostage during a live news broadcast by a figure who hacked visual feeds and obscured his own face with a logo of a stylized, smiling face with a quote from J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye rotating around the border. I thought what I'd do was, I'd pretend I was one of those deaf mutes. The full quote from main character Holden Caulfield reads, "I thought what I'd do was, I'd pretend I was one of those deaf mutes. That way I wouldn't have to have any goddamn stupid useless conversations with anybody. If anybody wanted to tell me something, they'd have to write it on a piece of paper and shove it over to me. They'd get bored as hell doing that after a while, and then I'd be through with having conversations for the rest of my life." This whole CEO kidnapping incident caused a firestorm of internet rumors, memes, and mass media frenzy. The police were humiliated by their ineffectiveness, conducting hundreds of eyewitness interviews, taking in thousands of tip line calls, but ultimately failing to apprehend the culprit, not even coming up with a lead on a suspect. Anytime anyone attempted to describe or draw the Laughing Man's face, all they could produce was the logo. In the wake of this incident, several copycat crimes and individuals claiming to be the Laughing Man emerged. The Laughing Man incident, the emergence of a standalone complex, and its highlighting of the incompetence of the Japanese police was actually inspired by a real-life crime, the Glico Morinaga case, a pretty wild account of kidnapping, blackmail, and extortion. Glico and Morinaga are two separate Japanese food processing and confectionery companies, and during the mid-1980s they both were targeted by a criminal group that referred to themselves as Kaijin Nijuichi Menso, the monster with 21 faces. It began with the kidnapping of Glico president Katsuhisa Ezaki from his home in Hyogo Prefecture in southwestern Japan on the evening of March 18, 1984. Two masked men entered his home and found him in the bath. So the dude was kidnapped naked. Meanwhile, his wife and 8-year-old daughter, who were encountered elsewhere in the house, were tied up and locked in another bathroom. His 2 other children were asleep at the time and were unharmed during the kidnapping. Ezaki was taken to a warehouse in Osaka, the next prefecture over, and the criminals demanded 1 billion yen and 100 kilograms of gold bullion for his safe return. However, 3 days later, Ezaki managed to escape his captors. This setback didn't deter the monster with 21 faces, though. They began to send letters to the police, taunting their incompetence and threatening to poison Glico products, leading to a recall that cost the company millions. The company then turned their attention to Morinaga, threatening to destroy that company and murder their executives unless another ransom was delivered. A sting operation was set up to apprehend the criminals when the police dropped off the demanded ransom. This ended in failure though, and even though the police encountered several suspicious individuals during the operation, including a person who would become known as the Kitsune-me no Otoko, fox-eyed man, police failed to capture this subject too. All the while, the group continued to send letters to various prefectural police departments mocking their uselessness. A few other food companies were targeted, but the campaign of harassment against Glico and Morinaga were the most prominent. After another botched sting operation in Shiga Prefecture, where once again the police encountered but failed to arrest or even question another suspicious individual, Shiga Prefectural Police Superintendent Yamamoto killed himself. A short while later, the letters stopped, and the monster with 21 faces was never heard from again. In 1994, the statute of limitations on the kidnapping expired, and 2 other charges related to attempted murder for the poisoning of food products expired in 1999 and 2000. And that was it. To this day, the crimes remain unsolved. If you want more details about the Glico Morinaga case, check out this article and podcast from the website Unresolved. I've linked it in the description. So the Laughing Man in Standalone Complex was inspired by the monster with 21 faces, but instead of going after food companies, the Laughing Man targets a micromachine manufacturer. Serrano Genomics is a leading company in the nanotechnology industry, having developed a micromachine therapy used to battle a fatal disease called cyberbrain sclerosis. The problem is, micromachine therapy has proven to be an ineffective treatment option. The much more successful Murai vaccine, developed by Dr. Chitose Murai, was shown in studies to effectively cure cyberbrain sclerosis. The Murai vaccine is also based on a controversy surrounding the real-life Maruyama vaccine, a cancer treatment developed in the 1960s and left unapproved by the Japanese Ministry of Health and Welfare Pharmaceutical Affairs Council. The council pointed out that Dr. Maruyama wasn't a cancer researcher and was unable to prove the long-term effectiveness of the vaccine, so they declined to approve the drug. Similar to the Maruyama vaccine, the fictional Murai vaccine was developed by accident, and Dr. Murai was unable to prove why it was an effective treatment for cyberbrain sclerosis. So the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare didn't approve its release to the general public. It's later revealed that the Approval Council had a vested interest in the advancement of micromachine technology, and Serrano Genomics specifically. After the Laughing Man hacked medical records and learned that several high-ranking members of the government and other wealthy individuals who had developed cyberbrain sclerosis were secretly receiving the unapproved Murai vaccine as treatment instead of micromachine therapy, he kidnapped the CEO of Serrano and tried to force him to reveal the truth on live television. Much like Holden Caulfield, the Laughing Man's goals were to expose the phoniness and corruption in society. When this plan failed, he disappeared. The Laughing Man makes his reappearance when the police commissioner refuses to acknowledge nanomachine surveillance devices, known as interceptors, had been illegally implanted into special task force members assigned to investigate the original Laughing Man incident. This leads to several individuals at the police press conference being cyberbrain hacked by the Laughing Man. Each time someone is hacked, their face is covered by the Laughing Man's logo, which is what people see with their prosthetic eyes. The Laughing Man's skills are so insane he can hack thousands of people at the same time, apparently. Section 9's investigation into the case leads them to the real Laughing Man on several occasions, but he always slips through their fingers. His true identity is actually revealed fairly early on in the story. He's a young man known as Aoi. But it's important to note, the character of Aoi, who chooses to help Section 9 uncover the truth behind the nanotechnology conspiracy, is not the original Laughing Man. He's not even the Laughing Man that disrupted the police commissioner's press conference. As I said earlier, the original is lost to the phenomenon of the standalone complex. Their eventual discovery of the secret behind the Mirai vaccine and micromachine therapy conspiracy ends up with them being hunted by members of the Narcotics Suppression Squad, an elite military unit under the direction of the Drug Enforcement Agency. This all gets pretty wild. Aramaki manages to pin murder charges on the head of the DEA in connection to an NSS operation where they wiped out members of a non-profit organization who managed to get a hold of the Mirai vaccine patient list with the help of the Laughing Man. The arrest of their leader causes the high-ranking NSS agents to go rogue, but Section 9 successfully deals with each attack. Realizing Section 9 is getting close to unraveling their plot, Secretary General Yakushima, a member of the ruling party who is the mastermind behind Mirai vaccine's rejection and promotion of nanomachine technology, throws the full weight of his political influence around and exposes Section 9 to the public, branding them as a terrorist cell plotting a coup d'etat. He sends a naval force called Umibozu, sort of an equivalent to a Navy SEALs outfit, to destroy Section 9 headquarters and arrest all members. At first, it appears Aramaki has served up his team on a platter in exchange for his own protection. Togusa, who is with Aramaki at the time the orders come down to arrest the members of Section 9, is the first to be taken into custody. After the other members stage a defense at Section 9 HQ, they split up and disperse throughout the city, but each are arrested in turn until only Bato and the Major are left. The Tachikoma, who earlier on had been sent back to the lab because of the problem with their individuality development, can only watch as the Section 9 smear campaign unfolds in their new roles as elderly caregivers, construction site workers, and test subjects. However, when they realize Bato is still out there and may need their help, they decide to abandon their current posts and rescue him. While attempting to contact the Major at one of her safe houses, Bato is attacked by an Umibozu assault squad, who've brought some armored suits along. The Tachikoma arrive just in time, and each of them sacrifices themselves in order to protect Bato. The Major witnesses their actions and realizes she was wrong about their behavior and development. That shot where a tear of oil wells up in the eyepiece of the Tachikoma as it rams the unexploded shell into the armored suit gets me every time. With only Bato and the Major left, they make a plan to escape the city, but the following morning, as they attempt to board an aircraft, the Major is taken out by snipers, and Bato is finally taken into custody. 3 months later, Togusa, who was subjected to days of interrogation, was eventually released. Since then, he hasn't heard from anyone about the fate of Section 9. He eventually learns, through his own research, that the Major has been killed and everyone else is serving time in prison. Yakushima has been exposed as the conspirator behind the Laughing Man incident, but the loss of his government position doesn't seem like punishment enough for Togusa. He resolves to assassinate Yakushima, but before he can pull the trigger, he's stopped by Bato, who takes him to Section 9's new headquarters. Everyone is out of prison, and Section 9 has secretly been reinstated by the Prime Minister. In order to provide evidence on Yakushima's corruption to the Ministry of Justice, Aramaki agreed to the dissolution of the unit with a promise from the PM that Section 9 would be reinstated after lower house elections. Politics, am I right? The Major has also survived, using one of her prosthetic bodies as bait to make it look like she'd been killed. Even Bato wasn't in on that part of the plan. Aramaki and the Major visit Aoi, and the chief offers him a job at Section 9. Aoi turns it down though, preferring to keep his current position at the public library and pursue his own interests, which I always thought was a shame. It would have been really cool to see Aoi join the team. In the end, Section 9 returns to active duty, having wrapped up the Laughing Man incident. It's a fascinating story that requires a lot of patience and attention to keep everything in order. Honestly, every time I watch this first season, and I've probably seen it about a dozen times by now, I catch new details or things I missed or overlooked. It has such good pacing and some really shocking moments, not all of which I've spoiled here, so if you've never seen it, I definitely recommend checking it out. Its mix of world building, character development, social commentary, political intrigue, and intense action sequences makes it a masterpiece. And it was followed pretty quickly by an equally multifaceted second season. But before we get to that, we've got another video game to talk about. Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex is a third-person shooter developed by Cavia and released in 2004 for PlayStation 2. The game takes place after the events of the Laughing Man incident. Section 9 is called in by the Japan Self-Defense Force to extract a witness to a black market arms deal involving surplus JSDF weapons. This mission leads the group to a conspiracy involving tainted micro-machine rice produced in the mysterious Tohoku Autonomous Region, where a giant dam built to supply hydroelectric power to the area turns out to be a front for a military research facility. The opening cutscene sees the team dropping into the pier area to conduct their mission, and the art direction, cinematography, and the inclusion of the TV series voice cast all make this high-quality stuff.
Bato, the exit's all yours.
Right. You just leave all of those fleeing rabbits to me.
I'm counting on you. Hey, Chief, ready whenever you are. What's so important about this op that I lose my day off?
The military has requested us to arrest a witness who's at a black market weapons sale taking place at Nihama on Pier N3. Apparently, the weapons were scheduled to be scrapped by the military but were misappropriated.
Shouldn't we put a leash on him and see where he runs?
The important thing is that he's the subject of an investigation. Make sure you extract his memories and find out who's backing his shopping spree. Regarding the current pier situation, it's believed that a substantially large armed group has infiltrated the site.
You want me and Bato to do this alone?
I'll have Ishikawa back you up. Pass information to him for analysis as you get it.
I doubt that you'll have any trouble with it, Major, but the operating systems at the pier are pretty old. I'll send you data piecemeal.
Tokusa, keep an eye on military intel. Roger. Saito, back up the Major from the water.
Roger.
Pazu and Boma, check out any groups you suspect are related.
Roger.
Now get out there and start earning your pay, people.
Roger that.
The military's moved up in the world. They got us cleaning up after their messes.
Let's have them owe us one.
So we're dropped into the role of the Major infiltrating this opening area, and the first mission is actually one of the longest in the game, but it's got a lot of gameplay mechanics to introduce. However, though it acquaints the player with many of the game's mechanics, it doesn't do a lot to explain them. For that, you'll probably want to hop into the training mode from the title screen before starting a new game, but the training mode is kind of boring to look at for a video, so I'll explain the controls and everything as the game introduces them. Move with the left stick, look around with the right, simple enough, and the Major feels good to control, weighty and solid. The aiming is a little sensitive. There's a bit of acceleration on the camera. The further you push the right stick in any direction, the faster the camera moves, making it difficult to line up precise shots. Many of the weapons also have spread, so just because your aiming reticle is lined up on an enemy's head, depending on your distance from them, you're probably not going to get off a proper headshot. Unless you're using a sniper rifle, of course. However, most of the standard weapons are automatics, shotguns, or explosive weapons like missile and grenade launchers. L1 fires, circle reloads. You can hold up to 2 weapons at a time. New weapons can be picked up with circle while standing over them. Triangle swaps between what you're holding. You also have several secondary attacks. Default is melee, shown by this icon of the Major doing a flying kick. Pressing L2 performs a combo of melee attacks that can knock out enemies. This is only really useful if you're up against one enemy or get the drop on somebody, but as the game progresses, you'll be facing off against groups of enemies or in tight corridors, so I found the melee option to become less practical as the game went on. Pressing square swaps to throwing knives or grenades. Two types, explosive and electrical. At the end of the day, they both produce the same results, but the electrical grenades have a slightly wider area of effect. R2 is the jump button, which takes a bit to get used to because it's such a non-standard placement. You can also perform wall jumps up to 2 times, and there are a few spots throughout the game where this is necessary to progress, and we're going to talk about those in more detail when we get to them. Holding R1 lets you hang from ledges. There's no grip meter, so you can hang indefinitely. That ledge shimmy animation though. R1 also climbs and descends ladders. In the heat of combat, pressing R1 also performs several cinematic dodge moves, which do not make you completely invulnerable to damage, but will help you take less damage if you manage to find yourself in the middle of a hail of gunfire. You can sometimes even dodge explosions. The jumping and platforming is pretty floaty, and I was constantly holding my breath because it felt like I was going to miss platforms and fall almost every time. Sometimes I did miss platforms and fall. Luckily, the game has a very generous checkpoint system throughout its stages. Once again, like the PS1 game, Standalone Complex is broken up into 12 missions. They're a bit longer than the PS1 games though. As mentioned, the first is actually one of the longest in the game. Most of them average about 15 to 20 minutes to beat, but there's some near the end of the game that are quite a bit shorter. So overall, it will probably take around 4 hours or so on a first playthrough. Not a long game, but not one that feels too short either. You play as either the Major or Bato depending on the mission. They both play rather similarly. Bato's melee attacks are just heavy jabs as opposed to the Major's acrobatics, but yeah, overall they don't feel that different from one another. Still cool that the game mixes things up, mainly for flavor and story purposes. You get results at the end of each mission and earn bonus points for number of enemies killed as well as the time it takes you to complete the missions. You also get multipliers for your difficulty level. Easy nets you 0.5, so a penalty. Normal is ×1, no bonus, but hard and above grant higher multipliers. The points unlock infinite ammo for different weapons, and also characters and outfits for the game's multiplayer mode, which I didn't even bother to try out. What, do you think I have friends? But if you do, hey, there's a multiplayer mode. Achieving a certain number of points by the end of the game unlocks new difficulty levels, from very hard to champion, which makes for 10 levels in total. Kind of overkill. Honestly, I think playing the game on normal or even easy is enough. The gameplay isn't that great, and the enemies just become spongier on higher difficulties, making it much less fun in my opinion. But if you're a completionist or up for a challenge, this game has you covered. Speaking of completion, there are also Japanese-style folding fans hidden around the stages, 10 in each one, for a total of 120 fans. If you find them all, you unlock more infinite ammo weapons. And you're really going to need to keep your eyes peeled for these. On my first playthrough, I didn't even notice any of them. The enemy variety isn't huge. Mostly you'll be fighting different tiers of soldiers with different weapons. But there are also armored trucks, tanks, gun turrets, both mobile and mounted, as well as armored suits and even other Tachikoma later in the game. There's one stage where you get to actually control a Tachikoma, and it plays very similarly to the PS1 game. High likelihood this was a nod to that game. It's also the shortest stage, which is a shame. I wish there were more opportunities to control the Tachikoma. The last gameplay mechanic is the hacking minigame. Some enemies have unit IDs, which when analyzed will allow you to see icons of other unit members. Certain enemies also have a hacking code, and with this you can hack specific enemies that have a blue icon above them. The hacking minigame amounts to lining up the two shapes within the time limit. Each time you fail, a bit of time is subtracted from the counter. In the beginning, the enemies are all at level 1, but as the game progresses, later enemies may have up to 3 hacking levels, possibly more, depending on game difficulty. I'm not sure. This is only required near the end of the first mission, where you need to bypass a group of snipers who are stationed above a container area of the dock. Every time after this, hacking is optional. Sometimes it makes parts of stages easier. And it is funny hacking an enemy and taking out others as this decoy, but honestly, just running in yourself or chucking grenades is easier and faster. Also, the hacking minigame is kind of boring, and most of the time, I didn't feel like doing it. I feel like there's some missed potential here, because hacking these snipers in the opening level is actually pretty cool. I wish the devs could have cooked up more set pieces like this throughout the game. But yeah, that about covers everything. The gameplay is pretty straightforward, but there are a lot of little mechanics that make it engaging, even if some of them aren't quite as fleshed out as others. The stages are all varied, from the opening docks with its container and crane platforming, to a parking garage, storage warehouse, abandoned city, underground facilities. These stages may not sound like much on paper, but the level design and care that went into the pacing of each area, the placement of enemies, the platforming sections, the objective hunting, it's all really well balanced. But the biggest thing about this game that stood out to me and really made me fall in love with it was the atmosphere. Now let me just say, before making this video, I had never played Standalone Complex, but I remember when it came out. I was a fan of the series, having watched it on Adult Swim, and I'd played the PS1 Ghost in the Shell game. So a third-person shooter where you finally get to control the Major and Bato, that was exciting. But I remember the game getting pretty mediocre reviews, with critics saying it was nothing to write home about, so I kind of forgot about it. But man, I missed out on something special. For one thing, it has so much personality. Hearing the Section 9 team members chatter back and forth, not only about mission objectives, but also cracking jokes with one another, having the Tachikoma pop into the conversations from time to time, Chief Aramaki breaking it all up and trying to keep everyone on track, it adds a lot to the experience.
About Fua's enrollment records, they've been semantically filtered.
It's possible that they were intentionally deleted.
Bounce the records over here to me. I'll analyze them.
Tachikoma, don't you guys have more important things to do?
No fair, Mr. Ishikawa, you have all the fun!
The communication with the other Section 9 members not only feeds you hints on what to do, but makes the gameplay itself feel less isolating. Even though you're only controlling one character on lone tasks throughout the missions, you feel like part of the team. They're on comms, backing you up. They don't break in so often that it's distracting, and for the less important chatter, you can just keep exploring or engaging in combat. So all of that is great, but there's another layer to the atmosphere in this game. A prevailing, otherworldly mood that creeps up on you. It takes a bit to sink in though. The first couple stages are straightforward. Fun, well-designed, but straightforward. When we get to the third stage though, things start to take a turn. Up until this point, we met the witness we were supposed to rescue in the body of a Jameson-type cyborg, little mini-units that house people's cyber brains. They show up in the manga and TV series. This cyborg gets their cyber brain fried, and Section 9 learns the Jameson belonged to Takeru Fua, a university professor who was supposed to have died 5 years ago. He ordered a shipment of weapons that's been left in a parking garage. Bato investigates and finds the package, but instead of finding weapons inside, it's filled with rice. Not just any ordinary rice, but micro-machine engineered rice. While some members of the team investigate more about Fua's past, others find Fua now using a prosthetic humanoid body at a rail station attempting to board a train to the Tohoku Autonomous Region. The Major heads to a storage facility Fua's been renting for the last 7 years, hoping to uncover the prosthetic bodies he's using to transfer his brain into. This stage is where Standalone Complex's more mysterious atmosphere starts to creep in. The environment is basic, an empty, multi-level warehouse full of storage containers, robot sentries, and armed guards. But the soundtrack is this almost pre-vaporwave style of mall music. It gives off a really weird vibe. And the relative emptiness of the stage adds to this liminal quality. The soundtrack overall is really good. It was composed not by Yoko Kanno, but Nobuyushi Sano, who's probably best known for contributing to the Tekken and Ridge Racer soundtracks. His work here isn't as diverse as Kanno's TV soundtrack, but it doesn't have to be. And as I've just described, it creates its own vibe. We'll look more closely at some other tracks later on as well. And though the music is excellent here, there are also times where the BGM drops out, and you're left in silence. At the end of the stage, when the Major discovers the storage container that contains one of Fuwa's prosthetics with its memory encrypted, Ishikawa says he and Boma will decrypt it. After that, the music is gone. There are no other clear objectives, and it seems like there's nothing to do but wait.
All clear.
Suddenly, you hear the sounds of new soldiers clearing the warehouse. You can spot them from your higher vantage point. And the upbeat techno that breaks out during the fight won't start until you fire the first shot and alert them to your presence. I love that kind of adaptive soundtrack in games. After escaping the warehouse, Bato and the Major follow Fuwa's trail to the Tohoku Autonomous Region. There, the two of them are meant to make contact with the research team's leader, Kei Yazawa. Toshimi Tagami, the region's director, will shortly be boarding a monorail into that region, so they're to track her using optic camouflage to sneak into the area. There are a lot of names being thrown out here, and what makes this story difficult to follow is the fact that we're not really introduced to any of these other characters. Much like in the first Ghost in the Shell game, their names are just thrown around. We don't get any scenes or screen time with them like we probably would if this were an episode of the TV series. Luckily, there is a handy world guide in the menus that can help you keep track of key terms, as well as character and location names. Some of these entries are incredibly detailed and provide a lot more background information than what's delivered in the dialogue of the game. These logs even keep track of those dialogues and conversations. There are even some extra bits of info and communications that play or are triggered throughout the levels that can be missed if you don't interact with certain objects or explore specific areas of the stage. There's a lot to uncover here. While entering the Tohoku Autonomous Region, Bato explains the entire place is covered by a jamming barrier, so their cybercoms will be unusable. However, while on the train...
Right. Bato, what happened?
Mr. Bato,
This isn't good, Major. We're gonna plow right into the station. If we don't get out, this will turn into a steel coffin.
I know that. The motor control program is being rewritten from the outside.
You mean they know what we're gonna do?
We don't have time to alter the program. You escape in the Tachikoma.
What are you gonna do?
Major! Crap. I guess we're inside the jamming barrier zone.
Now, the Major and Bato are cut off from one another, and the Major's cybercoms are blocked. She can still receive audio from the rest of the team, though. It creates a strange atmosphere in this fourth stage, and is really where that otherworldly mood I mentioned earlier enters the game. The exterior of the industrial complex that surrounds the dam is this large outdoor area. Wide open, blue skies, bleached buildings, brightly lit. Everything feels so artificial. The soundtrack is minimalist, atmospheric. Like at the end of the previous stage, there are also moments where it drops out entirely. The Major only being able to hear the conversations between the other Section 9 team members, but not able to participate in them, lends to this airy, isolated, empty feeling. This is my favorite part of the entire game, and it's not only thanks to the incredible ambiance. It's also another varied and well-paced stage, alternating between bursts of action, engaging with thoughtfully placed enemies, and quiet exploration that allows you to luxuriate in the vibes. Also, a few platforming puzzles where you need to figure out how to utilize wall jumps and ledge grabs to traverse and make progress. And not a speck of yellow paint to be found, meaning you have to actually study your surroundings. And the devs had to actually design the environments and use visual cues to guide the player. And yeah, sometimes you might get stuck for a minute or two, or fall down and have to try again when a path you thought may lead forward doesn't. But my god, imagine actually playing a video game. I'm going really hard on that bit, but yeah, I just thought this was great. And it felt good to figure these parts out. They're not super complicated, but they give you a sense of accomplishment after you find the right way forward. There's a correct path, but it wasn't handed to you on a spray-painted or paint-splattered platter, and I just appreciate that. While the Major is making her way through this area, Bato investigates the dam, looking for a way to turn off the jamming device in the area. This is another atmospheric stage. Not quite as much as the last one, but still really cool. It ends with a fight against a Jigabachi helicopter atop the dam. As it crashes into the waters below, we find out the water was just a hologram, which is a neat moment. After shutting down the jamming barrier with Bato, we switch back to the Major exploring the office block. In this stage, we're introduced to the thermo-optic camo pickup, which are conveniently placed in some areas with snipers that you'll need to run through. Shotgunning these enemies while invisible is incredibly satisfying. The office blocks are another excellently paced stage where you start on the higher up plazas and eventually make your way down to the street level. It has a great flow. At the end, the Major makes contact with Eiichi Goto, one of the head researchers at the facility. His signal is coming from a control room in the training grounds. So we switch over to Bato for the next stage, which takes us through those training grounds and connecting areas between them. It's another fun and interesting level. Very linear and straightforward overall, but the pathway through the training area, plus all of the opportunities for cover, the thought that went into enemy placement, it's all really good. Near the end, we have to face off against an armored suit, but you can pick up a missile launcher in the beginning of the stage that's perfect for dealing with it. Bato finds Goto dead once he reaches the control room, and on the security footage, the person who shot him looks suspiciously familiar.
Huh? No way.
Surely, in a world of cyberization, prosthetic bodies, and cloning technology, Bato wouldn't be fooled into thinking this was actually the Major, right? In the next mission, we get to pilot a Tachikoma, facing off against other Tachikoma-like tanks. This is that homage to the PS1 game I was talking about earlier. It's a very short stage. The objective is to take out the 3 other tanks and reach the elevator on the other side of this large open area. Some human soldiers carrying grenade and missile launchers can make life more difficult, but overall it's not too bad, and it's a nice change of pace from the rest of the game. As Bato and the Tachikoma are leaving the underground arena, they witness another large helicopter, which Bato identifies as an Oniyama, take off and destroy 2 military helicopters that were arriving in the region. There's also an anti-aircraft cannon that's preventing the military from intervening. So it's up to the Major to take out the helicopter, while Bato finds the code to operate the anti-aircraft cannon. The Major stage takes her through a building that's still under construction, where you need to time your movements so as not to get shredded by the assault helicopter hovering around. It ends with a face-off against the Oniyama, where the Major needs to jump aboard at the end to shut it down.
Not yet. I'm not done extracting the information.
Hurry up!
Level 5 barrier breach. Download.
Go!
Don't call me by my first name, okay?
Geez, you had me worried. Will you just be more careful with your life?
Sure, I'll keep that in mind. Because the worst is yet to come.
In the next mission briefing, we learn the nanomachine Rice being shipped out of the autonomous region includes a virus that causes cell death in anyone who eats it. Though, at this point in the story, Section 9 isn't sure if this is just a bluff on the part of the Tohoku Autonomous Region. Meanwhile, now that the anti-aircraft defenses are down, the military wants to launch an airstrike against the area. Section 9's objective is to find Kei Yazawa and Toshimi Tagami and get to the bottom of this. The Major heads into the mines in search of Yazawa and Tagami. taking these elevators filled with enemies further and further underground. Once she gets to the bottom, she finds herself once again cut off from the rest of the team, since there's no cybercom reception so far underground. Meanwhile, Bato heads into the factory housing all of the autonomous region's military hardware. This stage is a bit confusing at first. There are laser traps set up, and Ishikawa informs us to move cautiously, so I thought I needed to press R1 to dodge through them or something. But no. You need to trip them all to alert the security bots, because some of them are holding keys needed to access further areas of the stage. Bit of ludonarrative dissonance here, to pull a fancy gaming criticism phrase out of my ass. Deep within the facility, Bato finds several prosthetic bodies, along with Kei Yazawa's dead body, cryogenically frozen. The Major steps in and, come on Bato, the chief said earlier that she made it down to the bottom of the mine. How could she be up here?
Don't tell me she... Son of a bitch!
You're mad because the enemy is using another Kusanagi prosthetic, not because you think that's actually the Major. Come on. At the bottom of the mine shaft, the Major enters a large entrance to find a rice field?
Visual camouflage? No, it's not camouflage. This is where the tainted rice was created.
This large tank is our final boss fight, in this huge open rice field with its holographic sky. It's such an amazing setting for a final fight. All the while, Tagami, who's using another prosthetic that looks like the Major's, spouts her terrorist ideology.
So that people may experience the simple and pure joy of true happiness. In order for all poverty and suffering to be forever eradicated from the face of the earth, I intend to boldly set out a road that leads to nowhere.
Okay, I'm kind of busy right now. Can you shut the hell up? The tank has thermo-optic camo that needs to be shut down before we can really do any damage. Several groups of soldiers will spawn at different points throughout the arena, and one of them is holding a key card that needs to be used to access one of 4 terminals, also scattered around the arena. Each one will lower the tank's thermo-optic capabilities. Once all the terminals have been accessed, the hologram shuts down and we're free to damage the tank with our equipped weapons. Of course, at the end, we need to hop on top of it to completely disable it. Unfortunately, we don't get to fight our doppelganger and can only watch in the final cutscene.
If only you people hadn't shown up. If you hadn't gotten involved, everything would have gone according to plan and worked out perfectly.
What the hell is going on? Major? Sure, now I get it.
Bato, you really thought the Major was involved in this? You didn't for once think someone was using a similar prosthetic body. Don't you live in this world? Come on, buddy.
But which one? Both of their ID signals show each to be the real Major. Not much choice then. Motoku! So you're the fake!
You're late.
Damn. Nothing changes with you.
So, Tagami triggered the self-destruct sequence, and it looks like Bato and the Major are trapped. But the Tachikoma arrive to save the day.
Mr. Bato!
What kept you?
Let's save the sentimental reunion for later, okay?
Yeah, comic antics can come much later.
Huh?
We're out of here.
whole thing is underwater.
Looks that way.
Simultaneous multiple leaks of the Riku micro machine configuration have been confirmed. Thanks to that, the rights to the rice that the Japanese government had a monopoly on are now effectively license-free. As for the tainted rice, Ishikawa is working on a vaccine program for it.
Wasn't it a utopian dream of theirs to use the micro machine rice to finance their independence?
Eliminate hunger and poverty from this planet, and create a world in which all people are content. Those words came straight out of Toshimi's memory. The copyright has turned into copyleft. In a sense, you could say Kei Yazawa's dream has been made into a reality.
You think that woman had this plan too?
More than likely.
It's not easy to understand the love a sister has for her little brother.
By the way, Bato, I'm curious. How were you able to tell that it wasn't me back there?
Oh, that? Geez, how many years have we been teamed up now?
Unbelievable.
And you'd never turn around just because I called your name.
I heard that.
Standalone Complex on PS2 is a fantastic game. Going into it, my expectations were unfortunately colored by the reviews I had read when I was younger. Just goes to show, you should really experience as much as you can yourself instead of relying on other people's opinions, he says as he spoils an entire franchise worth of material. The gameplay is fun, the stages are varied, the level design is well paced, and the story lives up to the interesting and thought-provoking standards of Ghost in the Shell. Despite a few muddled bits due to how the story is told, with many characters only being described to us instead of actually seen, as well as a huge amount of details being buried within the world log section, it still manages to pull off a great narrative. And it's a relatively short game. I played through it 3 times for this video, and I can still see myself booting it up again at some point in the future, just for fun. I don't think it's a masterpiece or anything, it's not even in my top 20 of the PS2 library, but it's fun, solid. I liked it. Before we move on to the other major standalone Complex game on the PlayStation Portable, we have another season of the TV series to talk about. The second season of Standalone Complex, known officially as Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex Second Gig, aired from 2004 to 2005 in Japan. In the aftermath of the events at the end of the first season, Section 9 is now under direct control of a new Prime Minister, Yoko Kayabuki, Japan's first female PM. A new terrorist group known as the Individual 11 has appeared in Newport City. At first, they seem to be a decentralized group with no specific leader, but eventually connections between attacks become clear and the group is shown to have some level of hierarchy and structure. Their goal is the integration of refugees displaced during the 2 previous world wars into Japanese society by rallying public support against the government, who they view as being too tethered to foreign influence. The group is tied to the May 15th incident, a real-life event where a group of naval officers assassinated the Japanese Prime Minister on that date in 1932. After the assassination, military rule was imposed on Japan, and the perpetrators gained a huge amount of public sympathy. These events bolstered Japan's already more militant and expansionist foreign policies they were flexing throughout the 1920s, and would lead the nation directly into World War II by the end of the 30s. The second season of Standalone Complex's focus and filtering of historical events through its narrative highlights a theme that Ghost in the Shell as a whole often touches on: Japan's military history and national identity. Masamune Shiro's footnotes sometimes comment on Japanese domestic and foreign policies, and the entire premise of Ghost in the Shell, having Japan regain its military independence and become a world superpower, certainly comments on this. but the individual 11 plotline is where these background themes move to the forefront. It's interesting to note that Mamoru Oshii is credited for story concept and planning on the second season. The topics of national identity and Japan's place in the larger geopolitical landscape are themes he tackled in 1993's Patlabor 2. And it's clear there were still some unresolved elements of that film that Oshii wanted to continue to examine. In Ghost in the Shell second season, the decentralized individual 11 eventually gain a sole leader, Hideo Kuze, who rises to power after he fails to commit suicide with the other individual 11 leaders atop the Kyushu radio tower. The character of Kuze is very similar to that of Yukihito Tsuge from Patlabor 2, a former Japan Ground Self-Defense Force lieutenant colonel, after his squad was wiped out during a UN peacekeeping mission in Southeast Asia because his unit was forbidden from returning fire on attacking guerrilla combatants. He began to see the naivety of the Japanese government's pacifist policies. Patlabor 2's thesis statement can be summed up as follows. In a world defined by war, Japan's peaceful society is only an illusion. A dream built on the backs of the many conflicts and proxy wars fought in less prosperous countries around the globe. During the course of the film, Tsuge stages several terrorist attacks on Tokyo, hoping to wake people up to the reality of the world around them and reflect on the fragility of the peaceful lives they lead. The Patlabor unit is tasked with arresting Tsuge before US troops stationed around Japan intervene and take care of the situation themselves. Similarly, in Standalone Complex's second season, Hideo Kuze witnesses the government's treatment of refugees in the aftermath of the two 21st century world wars, which saw many Asian citizens displaced and seeking asylum in Japan. He trades his rifle for a camera with a photojournalist at the site of a refugee camp he's stationed at and walks off. He wanders for years and gains the trust of the refugees, positioning himself as the perfect figure to spearhead a bid for an independent refugee state within Japan. Unfortunately, Kuze is being manipulated from the shadows by a central intelligence officer named Kazundo Goda. Goda reveals himself to be the true villain of the second season, and like Kuze, he also has an analog in Patlabor 2. In that film, Shigeki Arakawa is an intelligence officer who helps orchestrate Tsuge's terrorist attacks on Tokyo, but defects from the former soldier's plot when Tsuge wishes to turn the situation into an all-out war. The designs for these characters are also strikingly similar. So I think on some level, Oshii was really trying to nail home that this season's storyline is a continuation of themes he was tackling in Patlabor 2. Golda uses Kuze's crusade for the rights of refugees to manipulate and shift the power dynamics in the Japanese government, colluding with Chief Cabinet Secretary Takakura to have the current prime minister removed from office in a bid for power. At first, Golda pretends to cooperate with Section 9, but is shown to exacerbate tensions between the refugees and the government. He implanted a cyberbrain virus into a digital essay titled Individual 11 that, when read alongside 10 other essays from the same author, would activate, causing those who read it to commit acts of terrorism in the name of the Individual 11. The catch is, the people who read all 11 parts would need to be virgins in order for the virus to take hold. So just a bunch of red-pilled incels, basically. Interesting to note, although Kuze believes in the Individual 11's ideology, the virus does not activate in his cyberbrain. This season isn't solely focused on the members of the Individual 11 and high-level political chess moves, though. It's just that the central story arc is more woven throughout the season this time around. The first season was clearly split between self-contained, standalone episodes and Laughing Man-focused, complex episodes. In the second season, the episodes are separated into 3 categories: individual, divisual, and dual. Individual episodes deal with the Individual 11 terrorists. Divisual episodes function as standalone stories, but they often contain threads that link to the overall plot instead of being truly self-contained. Dual episodes deal with Golda and the Central Intelligence's manipulation of information. There are still some fun standalone episodes, like one where the Major poses as a thief inspired by the 80s anime Cat's Eye. We get to delve into Paz and Saito's backstories. and a really atmospheric episode where the Major and Bato are part of a surveillance team stationed in Berlin during winter, tracking a terrorist known as Angel's Feathers. The Tachikoma return as well, having been reinstated by the Major, although they discover their AI are no longer housed inside each unit. Their heads are literally empty, and it's revealed the Major has placed their central AI in a payload on an American satellite. There's also an episode that hints Kuze and the Major may have known each other in the past, and I like how this eventually plays out at the end of the season. So there's still a lot of variety, but overall the writers paint with a more cohesive palette. Most of the refugees are concentrated on Dejima Island, an artificial landmass off the coast of Mihama Prefecture, and toward the end of the season, this is where most of the action takes place. After Kuze emerges as the sole leader of the individual 11, he links his cyberbrain with the refugees, allowing them to more deeply connect with his ideology. This is how he's able to gain such widespread support so quickly. He makes a deal to buy plutonium from some Russians to use as a bargaining chip to claim Dejima as an independent state. He's able to put together the funds for such a transaction by using a program that culls the decimal point values from Japanese citizens' bank accounts. Unlike the dollar and currencies in other parts of the world, the value of 1 yen is so small, the decimals are left off bank statements and other monetary documents, but the fractions still exist within the banking system. Over years, and by accessing millions of accounts, Kuze has managed to collect hundreds of millions of yen to fund his revolution. Section 9 attempts to capture Kuze during the plutonium deal, but he escapes by boat, and when they go to follow using their tilt rotor, a suicide bomber destroys the aircraft, injuring Ishikawa in the process. As mentioned though, Golda is pulling Kuze's strings, using the refugee situation as a means to insert himself into greater positions of power. When Kuze inspects the case he's received, he finds no plutonium inside. Golda has set it up to make it look like the refugees are harboring nuclear materials, justifying military action against Dejima Island. The plutonium is actually inside a bomb that's been planted at a radio tower. The military assumes it was the refugees who planted it. They were probably encouraged in their assumptions by Golda. But when Boma and Paz investigate it, they find the construction to be completely different from those used in the past by the refugee terrorists. Not only does the bomb contain plutonium, its housing and mechanisms are American-made. The Major and Saito commandeer a military truck and disguise themselves as soldiers to take the plutonium off-site. Meanwhile, Bato, using evidence gathered by the Major, exploits Goda's prideful nature and gets him to admit things only the mastermind behind the entire affair would have knowledge of. As the cabinet seems poised to approve a military blockade of Dejima, which will only exacerbate current tensions, Aramaki suggests the Prime Minister request a UN nuclear inspection of the island. She tells Chief Cabinet Secretary Takakura of her request, which smokes him out as one of Goda's co-conspirators, so he starts putting pieces into place to have PM Kayabuki removed from office. It'll take UN inspectors 48 hours to arrive in Japan, so Takakura persuades the rest of the cabinet to mobilize ground, air, and maritime defense forces to surround the refugees. With a jamming signal put into place around the island, Section 9 is cut off from their chief. The Major makes the call to take the plutonium they're carrying into Dejima, instead of delivering it to a lab facility as originally planned. She hopes that by doing so, they'll be able to directly deliver the plutonium to the UN inspectors and simultaneously capture Kuze. On Dejima, the jamming signal cuts off the refugees from Kuze's cyberbrain, which increases their unrest. At one of the barricades, a refugee opens fire on the gathering military ground force, resulting in the initiation of attacks and airstrikes against the island. Back in the capital, PM Kayabuki, Aramaki, Togusa, and Proto, one of Section 9's bioroids, are taken into custody, but Aramaki was anticipating such a move. The 3 Section 9 members manage to break free of their captors and mount a rescue mission for the Prime Minister. The rest of the team commandeer a military helicopter to enter Dejima, but are shot down. They survive the crash, and the Major goes off to capture Kuze, while the rest of the team attempt to deliver the plutonium to the UN. Around the same time, Kuze uses his supply of Stinger missiles to shoot down the aircraft responsible for the jamming signal and reconnects with the other refugees. He learns the scope of the military blockade and finds out that radiation scrubbers have been scattered into the surrounding airspace. This is the same micro-machine technology that was referred to as the Japanese miracle that rid the atmosphere of radiation after nuclear strikes on Japan's main island during the World Wars. Nowadays, they're deployed preemptively to contain nuclear fallout. That's when the Tachikoma, currently working in cyberspace to information gather, discover an American Empire nuclear submarine off the coast of Okinawa, armed with 2 warheads. They're able to hack the sub's database, but are unable to take over control of the system. Still, they ascertain the plan for a nuclear strike where the missiles will be launched through the stratosphere, breaking any way of tracing the nukes back to the Americans. The Major catches up with Kuze, but they're both buried under rubble during an airstrike. While trapped, we get some payoff from the earlier episode talking about the Major and Kuze's past, where they spent time in a hospital together undergoing cyberization. It's hinted very strongly that the boy from that scenario was Kuze, but he doesn't directly admit to remembering the Major. So there's still this ambiguity surrounding the whole thing, and I really appreciate that. I just like the way they handled this reunion of sorts. It's very understated, for right now anyway. Kuze explains that what he really wants is for the refugees to migrate to the net, free from any state control. And this is where his ideology broke from the individual 11s. He theorizes that his strong conviction toward this ultimate plan is what allowed him to resist Goda's cyberbrain virus. The Major orders the Tachikoma to free up space to allow the refugees' memories and ghosts to be stored on the net. But due to the riskiness of the plan and the impending nuclear strike, they choose to disobey her orders and instead commandeer a satellite hovering over Japan. Their plan is to put it in the path of the nuclear missile, intercepting it while in the air. However, they discover the satellite they plan to use is also the one housing their central AI. Back at the capital, Aramaki and Togusa manage to rescue the PM, who desperately attempts to scupper Secretary Takakura's scheme. The rest of Section 9 managed to deliver the plutonium to the military so it can be presented to the UN inspectors. Their journey to get that plutonium delivered is made more difficult by the Section 4 Rangers, who had orders to hunt Section 9. This ends with a scene where Bato reveals to them that he used to be one of them. He has the same prosthetic eyes they do. Bato's past as a ranger is brought up on several occasions throughout the series. But seeing this gesture of solidarity between them and understanding of what Section 9 is trying to accomplish is a great scene. I also love the moment where they're running toward the ground defense force line with one of the Rangers holding up the plutonium. There's a lot going on during this part, and there's an excellent song called I Do playing in the background, composed by Yoko Kanno and sung by Italian singer Ilario Graziano, and I wish I could play it for you without receiving a copyright claim. It adds so much weight and emotion to the events. While all of this is happening, the American sub launches its first nuclear missile. The Tachikoma proceed with their plan and drop their satellite, all the while singing about how they're all alive and that's why they're laughing. They once again sacrifice themselves to prevent a catastrophe. How many times are these little guys gonna make me cry? Bato literally has a cross to bear, and the Major almost tastes the forbidden fruit. This is where her scene with Kuze gets a bit heavy-handed as far as imagery goes, just a bit over the top, but yeah, Bato rescues the Major and Kuze from the rubble, and the latter is placed under arrest. Aramaki and Togusa arrest Chief Cabinet Secretary Takakura. With the nuclear threat diverted, PM Kayabuki orders Air Self-Defense Force fighters to buzz the American sub, deterring them from launching their second missile, a display that reinforces her ideal of national sovereignty through individual independence. Sometime after the end of the Dejima Island incident, Section 9 goes to arrest Goda, who's planning to defect to America. When he refuses to surrender, the Major steps in. The over-the-top gore in this scene is shocking. The series has a lot of violence, but usually not so detailed. Puts a memorable cap on the whole saga of chasing down Goda, though. While that's going on, though, an American agent poisons Kuze to silence him, commenting that there's no place for charismatic leaders they can't control within this country. I feel like this moment shows that even though Kayabuki's more individualist ideals for Japan's place in the world has won, it still can't fully escape from the influence of other nations. That's just the way of the world. Much later on, Section 9 is shown relaxing underneath the blooming cherry blossoms with their new Uchikoma think tanks, who show less personality than the Tachikoma. This is actually one of the opening scenes of the original manga. Aramaki calls them into action, and while the rest of the team head to their mission, the Major goes off on her own, hinting at things to come in the next standalone complex installment. Second Gig is another masterpiece to add to the Ghost in the Shell compendium, but this season demands your attention even more than the first, with many subtle details and hints of the larger narrative strewn throughout its entire run. There's a lot of great setup in the early episodes that pays off beautifully near the end. I like the more integrated plot with its focus on the plight of the refugees, the secret machinations of the intelligence division, the more thorough look at Japan's place in this fictional geopolitical landscape. It gives Standalone Complex such a far-reaching scope, but at the same time it doesn't forget the characters and individual stories that drive these larger plot points home. There's some really powerful, emotional gut punches throughout. I will admit though, it can get a bit overwhelming and fatiguing to follow all of the story threads through 26 episodes. And, like the first season, I've probably seen this one about a dozen times since it first aired, and it took me sitting down to really pick apart the episodes while making this video to be able to absorb all the ins and outs of what's going on. And there's definitely stuff I missed. But that's the great thing about Standalone Complex's 52 episodes. You can watch them over and over and still find some facet you overlooked before or some new angle to view these events. Back when I was originally watching the series when it used to air on Adult Swim, I remember hoping that there would be a third season. Third Gig. Where are they going to take these characters and this world from here? Unfortunately though, that never came to be. We got a manga series that's just a short run of books adapting some of the standalone episodes from the first season. Neat, but ultimately superfluous. I never understood the appeal of just directly turning TV episodes or movies into manga. It's like film or television novelizations. Really, what's the point? I'm sure people who enjoy those kinds of things will tell me exactly what the point is in the comments. But even though we never got a third gig, Standalone Complex's world would continue in a made-for-TV movie, Solid State Society. But before we get to that, we have another video game to discuss, Standalone Complex on PSP. Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex is a first-person shooter developed by G Artists and released on the PlayStation Portable on September 15, 2005 in Japan. European and North American releases followed in October of the same year, so a pretty quick turnaround on the localizations. One of the first things you'll notice about this game is that it's titled exactly the same as the PS2 game that came out just a year earlier, leading many to believe that this game was just a handheld port of the console version. But that's not the case. This is an entirely separate game with its own storyline and a completely different playstyle, being a first-person shooter instead of a third-person one. In Japanese, it has the subtitle Kariudo no Ryoiki, realm or domain of the hunters, but they dropped that in Western releases, leading to confusion and low sales. I have no idea what Bandai, the Western publisher, was thinking. They also published the PS2 game, so it's not like someone else handled that one. I don't know, it just seems really dumb. Right off the bat, we join Section 9 en route to dealing with a situation where terrorists have taken employees at the National Archives hostage. And yeah, we're dropped right into the middle of this mission briefing. No character banter to ease you into it, just straight into whatever the hell's going on. And boy, everybody is looking pretty rough in this one. I know the PSP wasn't as powerful as the PS2, but I don't know how I feel about these doughy, lazy-eyed, knockoff, action figure-esque character models. They're creepy looking.
Go ahead and have command authority for the investigation transferred to Section 9.
Oh my god, those flapping lips when they're actually speaking and not communicating through their cybercoms. Anyway, the terrorists are looking for a specific document called the H-88 report.
88 is short for National Police Agency Security Bureau Administrative Document, classification code Public Security Investigation H-88. It's the report on the attempted rebellion in the far north that includes the testimony of General Michiba.
An attempted rebellion in the far north? You mean the armed uprising by the officers of the Fifth Army who tried to turn the far north, which we'd just taken back, into an independent state?
That's right. The Public Security Bureau tried to bury the whole thing way back then. But certain leaks about the affair came out, and that brought the incident to the public's attention. Now that the politicians see which way public opinion is blowing, they requested a public review of it.
Yeah, man, thanks. I love being exposition dumped on right in the beginning of a video game. I'll definitely remember all of this shit.
All right. I'm going to begin the mission briefing now.
We haven't even started the mission briefing? The hell have we been standing around doing for the last 3 minutes? So here we are on the mission select screen. Right now there's only one available, but throughout the game there'll usually be up to 3 missions to choose from during each chapter, with a final mission opening up after that. So we have a little bit of choice as far as what order we want to complete things. The game is broken up into 6 chapters. The first one is like a prologue, so there's only 1 mission. Chapters 2 through 5 each have 4 missions, and Chapter 6 has 3, for a total of 20 missions. When we select one, we're taken to the briefing screen. Here we can listen to an overview of the current mission, fully voiced by support members of Section 9. We can also see our mission objectives clearly listed for us. The Touchcoma menu allows us to customize 4 different Touchcoma. We need to take one of them with us on each mission, and this is a huge part of the strategy in this game. Each Touchcoma has a different personality: balanced, aggressive, intelligent, and humorous. They have different stats and loyalty meters, and we'll look at how loyalty works in just a minute. Each Touchcoma has its own customizable layout, allowing us to equip different weapons and items. More equipment becomes available as rewards for completing missions. New weapons and items can be picked up throughout stages as well. The character menu lets us swap between 4 playable characters: the Major, Bato, Togusa, and Saito. And each of them have different max health and can be equipped with up to 3 weapons. Just like with the Touchcoma, new weapons and equipment becomes available as the game progresses. The missions keep track of which characters we've completed them with, and the in-game cutscenes will obviously change slightly, showing whatever character we've chosen to play as, which is a nice touch. So let's talk about the gameplay. We're in first person. The PSP analog stick moves forward, back, and strafes left and right. Since there's only one stick on the PSP, the face buttons are used to look around. Triangle and X for up and down, square and circle for left and right. Takes some time to get used to, for sure. R fires our weapon. L jumps. On the D-pad, the right button opens weapon select. Left button reloads. Up is interact. Down is lock on, which is practically mandatory considering how clunky the controls are. These are the default controls. There are other configurations in the options, but I found the default ones to be the easiest to wrap my head around. But still, they are awful. You get used to them, but they never feel good. One of the biggest problems is the camera control with the face buttons is not responsive enough. So you'll be tapping square or circle to try to line up shots sometimes, but double tapping those buttons does a 180 quick turn. Also, pushing the analog stick left or right twice in quick succession does this little side hop. I ended up doing both of these movements a ton of times when I didn't mean to, and it was incredibly annoying. As I said just a moment ago, lock-on is absolutely essential, but it's also annoying to make use of because you need to take your thumb off the analog stick to press down on the D-pad. And depending on where you're aiming, it could take a second for the lock-on to line up with the enemy. It doesn't just snap right to them. If you get overzealous and press fire before you're fully locked on, it'll cancel out and you'll miss. It's just all very clunky. As mentioned, we have a Touchcoma with us on missions. They have their own ammo pools and health, and if they're destroyed, it's game over. Pressing select opens the command menu. Here we can change the move orders, choosing to have it move around freely, stick with us, or wait in place. We can also change how it attacks: guns blazing, save ammo, or hold fire. Finally, there's point order, where we can direct the Touchcoma to different pre-designated points on the map. These orders are where the loyalty meter comes in. For example, the aggressive Tachikoma with the lower loyalty meter is less likely to follow directions. They'll hit enemies really hard, but will probably end up running out of ammo. And there are missions where you need to take down enemies non-lethally. Having the Tachikoma not listen to the hold fire command will have that mission ending in failure. You can hop inside the Tachikoma at any point during a mission, either to save health or ammo for the playable character, or just because it's cool controlling a Tachikoma. I found it was better to have the Tachikoma helping out rather than riding around inside it, but the option is there. Now, all of this customization sounds exciting, but unfortunately, it doesn't really matter. After trying out each Tachikoma, I ended up just sticking with the balanced one for the entire game, only changing up the weapon loadout for certain situations, and that got me through the game just fine. Same with the playable characters. It's neat to be able to choose Saito or Togusa and see them in cutscenes, but they don't control or play differently. I ended up choosing Bato for most of the game because he had the highest HP. The missions themselves all have varied objectives. Early ones are just taking out all the enemies and making it to the end of the stage, but later on you'll need to rescue hostages, take out a rogue android using a stun glove, find and disarm explosives before a timer runs out, and, escort NPCs. We'll talk about that in a bit. This game goes back to the arcadey feel of the PS1 game, with mini arenas separated by loading screens making up each mission. And yeah, the settings are also varied. Office buildings, docks, warehouses, factories, outdoor city areas, military complexes. Like I said in the previous games, the locations themselves aren't that original, but it's nice to be in different locations throughout the game. The music is fantastic. At first, I didn't really think much of it as I was playing the game, but after going back and listening to it to find music to use in this video, I think it might be my favorite soundtrack of the three games. It's a bit less intense than the PS1's OST, which makes it better to throw on in the background and vibe to. And, yeah, I think that is the end of anything positive I have to say about this game. Normally, I try not to be overly negative in my videos. I do critique stuff and talk about things I don't like, but most of the time I choose games that I find interesting. Even if they're not good per se, they have something else to them that sparks my imagination and makes me want to talk about them. But the goal of this video is to make as complete a retrospective of Ghost in the Shell media as I can. So I'm forced to talk about Standalone Complex on PSP. Just a warning, because for this game, I'm about to bring out a side of myself I like to call Dungeon No Chill. Here we go. I can't sugarcoat it. This game sucks. I hated almost every moment from the second mission onward. First one, fine. The controls are really clunky and awkward, but it's alright. Once you start getting into these more objective-based missions though, it's just, So chapter 2, we've got a choice of 3 missions here. The first one I choose, we have to go through a dockyard to rescue a former mayor who's been kidnapped. The first area is fine. But then there's a cutscene where the chief says that you need to not alert any of the enemies to your presence. So I thought, great, a stealth mission. With these controls, this is going to be torture. And yes, attempting to play this part as a stealth mission is torture and doesn't work. If an enemy spots you, you only have a few seconds to take them out. Otherwise, they'll supposedly alert the ones holding the mayor and they'll kill him. Mission failed. So I tried this a few times and just kept getting game overs. After the 5th or 6th attempt, I decided to try a different mission. Another one has you going through a subway station looking for 4 explosives that need to be disarmed before the timer runs out. The area is not huge, but it's slow and boring to walk around. There are enemies to fight, but once they're all gone, it's just you and the Tachikoma in this empty station. You have 15 minutes, and the first time, it took me about 10 to find the 4 bombs. Bear in mind, I was already a little frustrated from my attempts at that other mission on the docks. So when I found the 4th bomb and proceeded to the upper level of the station, only to find out I had to find 4 more bombs in this area on the same timer, I immediately quit the mission. So then I tried the 3rd mission, the one where you need to stun the android running around this outdoor city arena. I had some angry times whenever the Tachikoma killed the android because I forgot to tell it to hold fire. But even when I did tell it to hold fire, it didn't listen because I was trying out the aggressive one at this point in the game. But once I got a handle on that, it wasn't too bad. But then, for some reason, there's a second part to this mission where you have to walk around the stage and check garbage cans, looking for the body of an android child that's been thrown away. And while doing this, I just snapped. Why is this game having me run around looking through garbage? What is going on? None of these missions are fun or interesting. I did find that stupid kid who got thrown away, but then I had to stop playing for the day. Obviously, I came back the next day, got through the bomb mission because now I knew where the bombs were, but that mayor rescue mission on the docks, you're not supposed to stealth it. You're supposed to run in and kill everyone as quickly as possible so you can get to the mayor. And then once you're there, the bad guys don't kill him, and everyone runs around inside the warehouse trying to shoot you while the mayor just sits there tied up. Why do they kill him when you get caught earlier if they're not going to kill him now when you're right here about to rescue him? I mentioned ludonarrative dissonance earlier. Well, here you go. Why does the chief say, and I quote, "Act in complete secrecy," if you're supposed to murder house everyone as fast as possible? It doesn't make any sense. After we rescue the mayor, we pop him in the back of the Tachikoma and get out of here. So the ending of this mission is just backtracking while new enemies spawn in. Luckily, the mayor is hidden safely inside the Tachikoma. But as I said earlier, there are escort missions in this game, and they're all terrible. For some reason, you need to stay within like 5 feet of whoever you're escorting. And if you move outside of that range, the NPC will just stop walking. So you have to slowly make your way through the stage, and the way the spawn points for enemies are set up, you have to trigger them while the NPC is moving. You can't run ahead to clear out enemies beforehand. They won't spawn in. And I just kept thinking, why are we even escorting when we could just put the NPC in the back of the Tachikoma? We've already done that. The worst one is in Chapter 4, when you have to escort Aramaki through the train station, the same station where you disarmed all those bombs. I don't know why he's out in the field in the first place, and I can't believe how slowly he walks. Look at him. I swear to God, Aramaki, if you don't get your old, arthritic ass moving, I am going to fill this station with uppercuts. This is just unbelievable. There's another mission where you need to follow a Jameson model through a warehouse while other Jamesons attack you, and it is disgusting. They make you run back and forth through this factory with constantly respawning enemies, and every time you almost catch the target, there's a dopey little cutscene that plays like, "Oh gee, you missed it, there it goes." Fuck you, game. As the playthrough went on, my gameplay notes just devolved into me writing that every time a cutscene triggered, I hoped the mission was over. And when it wasn't and I had to do some other annoying objective, I just vented my frustration on my keyboard. It's funny reading these back. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, I had a bad time playing this game. And it's also the longest Ghost in the Shell game so far. The first one was like 2 hours. The second was around 4. This one took me 6.5 hours. It doesn't sound like much, but it felt like 60. But hey, it's Ghost in the Shell. The story's good, right? Spoilers, it isn't. One of the major criticisms I've seen lobbed at Ghost in the Shell, especially Standalone Complex, is the amount of dialogue and talking head sequences throughout the series. And yes, it is a very dialogue-heavy franchise. Even the manga has a lot of text. But in other iterations, paying attention to the dialogue usually pays off. It's just a matter of patience and taste for that style of storytelling. Standalone Complex on PSP goes way overboard though, indulging in exposition to the point of absurdity. Almost every single cutscene is just a bunch of characters standing around talking about the plot. It's mind-numbing. There's nothing visually interesting happening. I can say that's the saving grace in other adaptations. At least they put forth the effort to make some sort of visual montage. But here, it's just these lifeless dolls staring goggle-eyed at each other, flapping their lips and talking endlessly. The cutscenes are so long, minutes upon minutes of just talking. Our already established, well-loved members of Section 9 give off no personality, and the side characters are beyond boring. Even the Tachikoma start to get annoying, which I hate to say because I think the Tachikoma are great. But anyway, Section 9 find themselves on assignment to the far north, We're talking former Aomori area of Japan's main island, to protect former cabinet member Hiruma, who's a real dickhead. The volume in the cutscenes is all over the place, too.
I'll ask you once again, why did you close down the Tohoku Linear Railway?
As I've said again and again, it was because there was a risk of a terrorist attack aimed at the former cabinet minister.
What is it you think your people came all the way up here for, instead of the police or the military?
What? Speak up. The mission to protect Hiruma leads them to a Yakuza group that's smuggling military-grade weapons. We have to chase down Chiri, the underboss of this gang, for a few missions throughout Chapter 3. This leads to a confrontation with a young female sniper, Sakari, and her black Tachikoma named Seta. The writers try to give Chiri some depth by having him spout a bunch of existential mumbo-jumbo. Again, it just feels really shallow, like we have to have a villain wax philosophical because that's what Ghost in the Shell does. When we actually face off against Chiri, it's the most awkward thing ever. The Tachikoma fights him, but we don't have direct control over it. We can only issue the normal movement and firing commands by pressing select, and the camera is facing the Tachikoma the entire time. I had to look up somebody else's playthrough on YouTube because I thought it was a glitch. But no, this is how it is. Apparently, I could have changed the view to inside the Tachikoma with the L button, but you still can't control anything. It's just such an awkward moment. We can hop inside the Tachikoma and control it during missions, so why couldn't we control it here? I get that according to the cutscene, it's acting autonomously from the player character, but come on, you're gonna choose this moment, a boss fight, to not be ludonarratively dissonant? I swear that's the last time I'm gonna use that phrase in this video. Anyway, for a lot of the rest of the game, we spend time tracking down weapons shipments and saving Hiruma from assassination attempts. It just kinda goes on like that for a while. We fight Sakari and Seto a couple times, which always ends in them running away before we can gain any new information. Eventually, Ishikawa learns that the black think tank is a prototype for the Tachikoma, and the girl, Sakari, is a bio-humanoid. Both of them are being used by a group called the Senninkai to assassinate Hiruma. Apparently, the Yakuza gang from earlier was also being used by the same group to smuggle weapons for them, so that was the significance of that whole episode. As the Senninkai close in on Hiruma, who always just seems to be running around by himself like an asshole instead of staying put and being protected by Section 9, we have a final confrontation against Sakari and Seta in front of a hotel. It feels like this should be the final boss. We've already fought this duo twice before, and they are the two tasked with assassinating Hiruma. But no, after defeating them and destroying the Black Tachikoma, Sakari runs off. Inside, Aramaki is here for some reason with Hiruma. Again, why is Aramaki out in the field when shit is going down? This never happens in the manga or show. We have to fight a group of Senninkai soldiers. Then, the final boss, or bosses, are 3 Senninkai members in armored suits. It's a tough fight, and we're left with whatever ammo and resources we had left over from the earlier part of the stage. There are only a few explosive weapons lying around this area too. It took me a few attempts, but they finally went down. In the end, we find out Hiruma was the villain all along. Who didn't see that coming? He was conducting illegal real estate deals with the Russians, which is how that whole H-88 report from the beginning of the game fits into the picture. It was a document of these transactions. Hiruma organized the attack on the National Archives to cover up this information. So the Senninkai were ultra-nationalist terrorists who wanted to kill a traitor to the country for selling off land to a foreign power. Section 9 security detail was a ruse to get to the bottom of Hiruma's suspected crimes. But what about Sakari, the girl who the Senninkai had tasked with killing Hiruma? What, are you waiting for an answer? I don't know. The Tachikoma seem to know, though.
When it comes down to it, who was Sakari anyway? Her physical capabilities could match those of a high-output prosthetic body, but was she really human?
It so happens that I know the answers to all those questions because Seta told me everything when I linked with him.
You're so lucky. Tell me too. Ooh! So that's what it was all about.
Boy, I'm sure glad that we're AIs, aren't you?
It's a lot easier for us to communicate.
Now we have a really great souvenir for the guys who stayed behind at the Section 9 hangar, don't we?
I don't know what the fuck that means. There's also a post-credits scene with the Tachikoma, reminiscent of the Tachikomatic Days shorts that follow the standalone Complex TV episodes. This one ends with them chanting,
Crap, crap, crap! Crap, crap, crap! Crap, crap, crap!
Yeah, perfectly sums up my thoughts about this game. This is actually in reference to an earlier cutscene where they discuss a tradition in the far north where children weren't given real names until they developed their own personality. Until then, they were called piles of crap, according to the Tachikoma's research. Harsh. Anyway, this game is a pile of crap, and I never want to play it or talk about it again. There are people who seem to have enjoyed this, though, and if you're one of them, hey, more power to you, but I wanted to throw this thing in the goddamn trash. So let's move on to the next part of the standalone Complex continuity, the made-for-TV movie, Solid State Society, which is not a pile of crap. Taking place 2 years after the events of the Individual 11 saga, it's 2034, and the Major has left Section 9, but she still keeps tabs on them and conducts her own private investigations. Togusa has been named squad leader and been cyberized as well. He was always the most human member of the team, but has had to accept cybernetic enhancements to assume his new role. Bato was offered the position, but obviously shaken by the Major's exit, chose instead to become a trainer of new recruits. So Bato's characterization here takes some inspiration from Innocence's Bato. The film opens with Section 9's investigation into the suicides of several military refugees from the former Siak Republic. Despite some of these incidents being public and even turning into hostage situations, Prime Minister Yoko Kayabuki, still retaining her position, is reluctant to take their leader, Colonel Karum, into custody. Her administration has been built on supporting the refugees, and opposition parties are looking for any crack in her armor. Section 9 pays the colonel a visit covertly and find him already dead. He's connected to a nursing net system that monitors his vitals, and they've been reporting all normal, even though the colonel has clearly been dead for several days, and even looks to have manually disconnected himself from the nursing net terminal for some reason. A message written in blood on the floor next to his bed mentions the puppeteer. The colonel's son, who killed himself during a hostage situation at the airport in the beginning of the film, also mentioned the puppeteer. So yes, Solid State Society draws elements from the manga's first story arc, the narrative that Oshi's original film also took elements from. However, beyond the antagonist being a, to quote Aramaki, ultra wizard level hacker, and several other scenes lifted from the manga, especially toward the end of the film, Solid State Society does its own thing with its core storyline, taking those scenes and adapting them to its own agenda, tackling issues and topics that no other Ghost in the Shell adaptation has touched on before. And that's what makes Solid State Society such a solid addition to the franchise. Not only does it showcase standalone Complex's excellent production values and Kamiyama's knack for creating complicated, tightly paced narratives — he wrote the screenplay for this film — but it examines some real societal issues faced by modern Japan, such as their graying population, domestic abuse statistics, and the ultra-nationalistic tendencies of some of its ruling parties. Throughout the course of Section 9's investigation, the Major has her own plans, and she ends up crossing paths with Bato at a research hospital as she runs off with a case full of mysterious vials. She warns Bato to stay away from the Solid State. Hey, I think we're all staying away from the Solid State. Have you seen those prices? Parallel to this, Togusa and Ishikawa discover that Colonel Karum was planning to spread a micro-machine virus using kidnapped children as vectors. These children underwent cyberization surgeries and had the memories of their parents erased. When asked for their home addresses, they all give the addresses of senior citizens who are all members of what's referred to as the Noble Rot Senior Citizen Network. Not a flattering turn of phrase in English, but Noble Rot refers to beneficially fungus-infected wine grapes that, when picked in that state, can be used to produce botrytized wine, a category of dessert wine. So we're comparing senior citizens here to those fine ingredients. As Section 9 digs deeper, they discover over 20,000 children who've all undergone cyberization and been assigned to senior citizens, which at first seems like a data error. However, when attempting to verify the information, Section 9's network is hit by a cyber attack. Cutting the power, with an axe, is the only thing that stops the infiltration. Aramaki returns to HQ, lugging with him the container the Major had stolen from the research hospital. The vials turn out to contain samples of the micro-machine virus Colonel Karum was planning to spread. They were delivered to the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare. All this time, Bato has had his suspicions that the Major may be involved in this. In fact, he believes she may be the puppeteer. Before he and Togusa can really wrap their heads around this, another crisis occurs. Proto, whom you'll remember from Second Gig, has been infected by a virus, causing him to kill several androids who were guarding the abducted children. They manage to subdue Proto and learn that all of the children have escaped, so they conduct infrared scans around the area in an attempt to locate them. Meanwhile, Aramaki receives information that another of Karum's men has entered the country, an elite sniper named Raj Puto. So Bato and Saito head out to intercept him. This sniper situation is actually one of the self-contained stories from Human Error Processor. However, in the manga, obviously the backstory is different, and the epic sniper battle takes place on a golf course. While that's all going on, Togusa tracks down one of the missing children who has gone back to the senior citizen he had been placed with. He finds the child in an unkempt apartment, and the old man, attached to the nursing net system, begs Togusa not to take the child away. He's the man's sole heir, and he'd rather give his life savings to him than let the government take it after he dies. He also reveals the little boy was a victim of abuse in his original home, and that this is the will of the solid state. He warns Togusa not to interfere unless he wants to end up as another suicide. The old man dies, and as Togusa hands over the boy to the local police, he notices the body being carted out by members of the Sacred Citizens Relief Center, and overhears them mention the old man should have a young boy living with him. They blame it on a database error, but Togusa realizes the child would have been taken into their care if he hadn't rescued him. Then we get this creepy scene of all the senior citizens in the area, some of them with children, giving Togusa the evil eye. As Togusa wonders just what solid state is all about, he receives a call from his wife, who's frantic because she can't find their daughter. Saito and Bato deal with a sniper who they learn was hired by a Diet member named Mune, but it turns out the man he was assigned to kill is Mune. He had no idea his employer and target were the same person and wonders if he's become a victim of the puppeteer. He reveals the puppeteer isn't a person, but an abduction infrastructure built within the solid state, which is actually the nursing net, and the government is aware of this entire operation. Togusa, who has rushed back home only to find out the call from his wife was a false alarm, their daughter was only playing with a friend next door and didn't tell her mom where she'd gone. Damn kid. So Togusa offers to drop her off at school on his way back to the office. Bato relays the info he learned from the sniper to him through cybercoms. It turns out the Siak Republic terrorists had planned to make use of the nursing net to implant their micro-machine virus in the children who were abducted, but ended up being hacked by the puppeteer and the solid state to protect their own interests. Just then, Togusa's daughter's cell phone begins to ring. How prescient that a film from 2006 would predict 6-year-old kids would be toting around phones in the future. The ID says mom, but when Togusa answers, his cyberbrain is hacked by the puppeteer, while Bato is on cybercoms with him. This leads to an intense sequence where, under the control of the puppeteer, Togusa drives his daughter to the cyberbrain surgical hospital, which is filled with senior citizens awaiting their very own abducted and newly cyberized child. While Bato rushes to Togusa's location, the puppeteer wants to show Togusa firsthand how they forced parents to consent to cyberizing their children. After that, the parents' memories of their children were erased, and the children's memories of their parents were wiped as well. Instead of handing her over to be cyberized and become part of the solid state network, Togusa has enough control over his own faculties to choose death over losing his daughter. He holds his gun to his own head and tells her to close her eyes and run when she hears the bang, like the starting sound of a relay race. The sound happens just as Bato arrives on the scene, and Togusa's daughter runs as her father falls. But the Major, in optic camo, intervenes at the last second, sending Max and Musashi into Togusa's cyberbrain to wrest control away from the puppeteer. Max and Musashi's digital avatars look suspiciously like Tachikoma. Max and Musashi were also the names of Kusanagi's digital companions in man-machine interface. The Major reveals she used Togusa as bait to pinpoint the location of the puppeteer's hub cyberbrain within the solid-state network, and they find out that it lies within the Sacred Citizens Relief Center headquarters. With the gang back together, the Major tells them everything she's learned during her own investigations into the puppeteer. Mune is a member of the Treaty Deliberation Board, an ultra-nationalist group that wants to create a ruling class comprised only of pure-blooded Japanese. He's also the head of the management team at Sacred Citizens Relief Center. She believes the puppeteer is one of the core members of that group. Their headquarters is heavily guarded, so the Major breaks out the newly rebuilt Tachikoma for the infiltration mission. Though their main AI was destroyed when they used their satellite to stop the nuclear attack during the Dejima crisis, the Major found their memories saved on the net. We can actually see one of the Tachikoma backing up their memory just before joining the rest of them before dropping their satellite in the last episode of Second Gig. The infiltration of the Sacred Citizens HQ is a great group of action set pieces. Eventually, Section 9 discovers the abducted children in the Education Center, where they confront Mune and the rest of the management team. Mune explains the kids are orphans who are being educated using tax funds, an investment in the future of society. When Aramaki points out that those tax funds have been extorted from senior citizens and refugees, Mune counters that both groups are just a drain on the system anyway. The violation of human rights and cyber ethics are a means to an end. When it's pointed out that the children aren't orphans but have been kidnapped, Mune is left astonished. He genuinely had no idea about the abduction system. The architect of the solid-state system steps forward, saying he was the one who input the abduction protocol. He then shoots himself. The Major dives into his cyberbrain in a scene straight out of the puppeteer's storyline of the manga, but also a visual nod to the way this scene plays out in the 1995 film. The puppeteer explains its motives. Despite a declining birth rate and graying population, 50,000 children under the age of 6 die every year, with 30% attributed to domestic violence. The solid-state system was put in place to rescue these endangered children and place them with senior citizens who would care for them and pass on their fortunes, instead of having their assets confiscated by the government after they died. In order to continue its plan without further interference, the puppeteer traps the Major in a logic maze, explaining that its consciousness has integrated with many others over the years, with the implication being that even though this plan has been foiled, other traces of itself in other individuals will rise up in the future and attempt to correct society. This is our standalone complex theory connection. Who was the original puppeteer? We'll never know, and it doesn't matter. The only important thing is the realization of the ideals. But yes, in the end, after this whole plot has been unraveled, the children will now be returned to their original families, even though they'll most likely be put right back into the environment of abuse that the Solid State attempted to save them from. Solid State Society offers one of the bleakest resolutions to Section 9's work, really illustrating the gray area they occupy between law and justice. Their hands are tied. They've upheld the law, but have they really done the right thing? The Major reawakens at Section 9 with her cyberbrain recovered. This whole scene with the Major and Bato at the pool with the holographic beach scenery is taken from the puppeteer storyline in the manga as well. And though it's left a bit ambiguous, it seems to hint that the Major will be rejoining Section 9, which is a good place to leave things. With all of these stories and entries that have the Major missing in action or off doing her own thing, it's kind of comforting to at least be able to imagine that things will return to normal at the end here. And that's Solid State Society. One thing this movie is so good at is misdirection. It's performing all of these storytelling sleight of hands to throw you off the main plot, and it's really good at it. Like, I don't think anyone would actually believe the Major would turn out to be the puppeteer. But the whole setup with the Siak Republic terrorists could have been the plot of the entire movie. There's enough meat on them bones to tell another gripping tale of Section 9 taking down bad guys, while also commenting on refugee inequality and examining the ultra-nationalistic tendencies of certain parties in the government. Instead, that storyline is thwarted by what becomes the central focus of the film, the solid-state nursing net and their larger goal of saving abused children. By very dubious means, but still. There are also examples of other storytelling deception, the most prominent being the situation with Togusa's daughter. As we learn what solid state is and its connection to abducted children, when Togusa receives that call from his wife, I thought, oh boy, she's been kidnapped by this system and it's going to turn into a rescue mission. But then we find out it was a false alarm, and it's like, okay, where is this going? Then Togusa gets brain hacked, leading to the revelation that all of those kids' parents gave consent for their children to be cyberized after being put under the puppeteer's control. It also leads to the climax of the second act, with Togusa making the decision to shoot himself before being stopped by the Major. The movie is so good at pointing you in these different directions, then spinning you around to face something else. Just great plotting and pacing. Solid State Society might just be my favorite piece of the entire standalone complex saga, and definitely one of my favorite entries in the entire Ghost in the Shell franchise. It has a weighty, philosophically and politically complex narrative that weaves so many ideas throughout its runtime. It has quiet moments of character study, punctuated by some great action scenes, and it ends with a complicated look at how the law doesn't always favor justice. Even with a slightly less than 2-hour runtime, it manages to pack almost an entire season's worth of intrigue into it. And again, after watching it for the first time years ago, I held out hope for Third Gig. The Major seemed to be joining Section 9 again. This is the perfect reset, with the potential to bring in a lot of interesting character development and tension. She still has her doubts about her duties. Bato has his worries that he'll lose her again. Togusa is in a leadership role, and Bato and the Major even have a short discussion about how the Major returning would affect that. There's so much setup to do something really interesting with these characters. But the years went by, and there was no whisper of a third gig. During 2006, the same year Solid State Society was released, a trilogy of novels arrived, written by Junichi Fujisaku, one of the scriptwriters on the show. These are original stories set in the standalone complex world. The first, The Lost Memory, takes place during the first season and follows Section 9's investigation into The Awakened, a group of teenagers who are cyberbrain hacked and forced to commit crimes, only to have their memories erased afterwards. It's actually a pretty good story, and since it's from one of the series' scriptwriters, has the feel down, even in novel format. The second book, Revenge of the Cold Machines, is made up of 3 seemingly standalone short stories that eventually come together to form an overarching plot. It takes place in between the first and second seasons of the TV series and focuses mainly on the growing refugee crisis. The first story, Double Targets, deals with some refugees who are forced by a local crime syndicate to assassinate Chief Aramaki. The second story, First Love, Last Love, is told from the perspective of one of the Tachikoma, who's been separated from the team and ends up following around a traffic cop, providing a view of the struggles of ordinary citizens and refugees. The third story, Revenge of the Cold Machines, is about a group of individuals who have stolen military-grade cybernetic parts and Section 9's efforts to track them down. This final story ties together the previous 2 storylines and also foreshadows some of the events and political drama that dominates the individual 11 saga of the TV series. The third book, White Maze, returns to the novel format and is ultimately about a virus that seemingly turns those infected into vampires. Several government officials are found dead with their bodies drained of blood. This erupts into a conspiracy that pulls in elements from the previous books and once again ties into the refugee crisis and what will end up happening in the second season. This book also focuses more heavily on the Major as opposed to Section 9 as a whole, foreshadowing her move at the end of the season to leave Section 9. Giving more context to that decision and helping to ease the abruptness of that revelation in the beginning of Solid State Society. Unfortunately, just like that Innocence tie-in novel, all 3 of these books are out of print, which is really criminal. I wish they were at least available digitally. Both the Innocence novel and these 3 standalone complex books provide so much richness and context to the other media they're associated with. On the flip side of that are the 3 mobile games released in 2011 and 2012. There's very little information about these games. A Hardcore Gaming 101 article turns up some of the only images I could find. And you all should definitely check out Hardcore Gaming 101. You want to know how I learn about some of the games I make videos on? Just click through the random articles on this site. Anyway, the first mobile game, standalone complex Cyber Mission, was developed by Gree. Outside of a commercial for the game which shows off some footage but doesn't have any sound on either YouTube or Nico Dolga, there's nothing else about this game. It's hard to tell what the gameplay was even supposed to be. The second mobile game was simply titled Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, making it the 3rd game to use that exact same title. HG101 managed to dig up an old news story that stated the game had an original scenario written by staff from the TV series. Players would supposedly take the role of a new Section 9 recruit, kind of like the PS1 game. The one blurry screenshot that's available hints that it might have been a visual novel, but who knows? Finally, there's standalone complex Tachikoma Wars, released in 2012. This looks to be some kind of mobile Pokemon knockoff where you train Tachikoma and use them in turn-based battles. But again, it's really hard to glean any details from the few screenshots that are available. Oh yeah, and of course there were a few pachinko games too, because what popular franchise doesn't have a pachinko parlor game? Continuing the topic of defunct and inaccessible games though, there's also 2017's Ghost in the Shell standalone complex First Assault Online, which was a free-to-play first-person shooter developed by Meeple and published by Nexon. It had a very short lifespan, entering early access in December 2015. The full release came about in July 2017, and less than 6 months later, in December 2017, the servers were shut down and the game was delisted. So what was First Assault Online? It was essentially a squad-based shooter featuring PvE and PvP modes. Players could customize their cyborg avatars and share skills with other players. There were thermo-optic camouflage and armored suit options, and even some mech to control. I never played this game, so the only footage I have is from the official trailers. According to critic and player reviews though, First Assault Online was painfully average. Aesthetically faithful to the standalone complex franchise, but ultimately a disappointment as a game. If you want more details about the actual gameplay, I'd suggest looking up some other videos from creators who actually had the chance to play it. Anything I say about it is just secondhand, but yeah, it appears the players and devs were unhappy with the finished product and it came and went very quickly. Another inaccessible casualty of the franchise to add to the numerous books, manga, and mobile games that are no longer available. Now, there are a couple more pieces of standalone complex we need to examine, but I decided to separate them into the late era Ghost in the Shell section of this video for reasons that will become clear later. Let's go back to 2013 though, because in that year, a new series began with a new look and a whole new continuity. It's time to find out what Ghost in the Shell Arise has in store for us. Ghost in the Shell Arise officially began with a prequel manga written by Junichi Fujisaku, writer of episode screenplays and the actually pretty good trilogy of standalone complex books. Illustrated by Takumi Oyama, Ghost in the Shell Arise Sleepless Eye follows Bato during his days as a ranger. It chronicles his time on the battlefield and his first meetings with the Major, and how they're all used as dogs of war by the government and the organizations that oversee them. Some of these background elements were hinted at in the original Ghost in the Shell manga and standalone complex. There are mentions and flashbacks of them being soldiers during the World Wars. Of course, all of the details in those iterations were different. Here, in Arise, the creators are establishing something new. Which is interesting, but it kind of highlights one of my major issues with the Arise timeline as a whole, which I'll dig into in more detail as we move into the anime. This OVA series consists of 5 roughly hour-long episodes, which chronicle the creation of Section 9, again rewriting the character origins franchise fans were already familiar with. The series was directed by Kazuchika Kise, who actually got his start in the anime industry working as an animator on the first Patlabor movie. There's another Oshi connection for a Ghost in the Shell series. Arise was his directorial debut. The series began with controversy thanks to the redesigned characters, especially the Major, who was given a younger, more childlike look. The creators have said this was meant to reflect the younger age of her character, but she has a prosthetic body. It doesn't age. I think they just wanted to establish Arise as its own separate thing, which ultimately I think is fine. I don't really like the character designs in this series, but they're not bad, and I don't know, I just kinda got over it pretty quickly. The production values on the episodes are high. The animation really is top-notch, with not only some great action scenes, but awesome imagery in some episodes, especially during parts of the story that take place in cyberspace. Arise begins with the Major working for the 501 organization, a shady government outfit that owns the rights to her body. The first episode has her being loaned out to Aramaki to investigate the mysterious death of an arms dealer. Aramaki is trying to put together a convincing reason to fund a new covert counter-terrorism team that would operate directly under the Prime Minister. Throughout this episode, we're also introduced to Bato and Togusa. Bato is a mercenary, and Togusa is still a detective on the Nihama police force. And I don't know, I just find the antagonism between all of the core, soon-to-be Section 9 members a bit uncomfortable. This continues in the next couple episodes as Saito, Ishikawa, Boma, and Paz are also introduced. I get what they were going for here, trying to show the arc of these characters eventually learning to trust each other and working as the team we all know them to be, but it just comes off as awkward. Even if you read the Sleepless Eye manga, which details more of the characters' rocky interactions, it still all just doesn't sit right. The Logikomas are fun though, kind of toned down prototype versions of the Tachikoma and Standalone Complex. Their personalities resemble the Fuchikoma from the original manga, and you can kind of see the thread that would possibly lead to their individualism in Standalone Complex, if this series was ever planning to go in that direction. But yeah, the relationships between the characters are a bit stilted here. We don't get a whole lot of character growth outside of we don't like or trust each other, but now we work together, so now we like and trust each other. The Major gets to shine a bit. There's a subplot involving her boyfriend, which is lifted from the manga. However, there, her boyfriend was another cop who was tasked with keeping tabs on Kusanagi. Here, he's a prosthetics manufacturer who supplied her limbs, which are malfunctioning thanks to a false memory virus, giving a whole new meaning to the term phantom limb. And he also betrays her, being a core member of a conspiracy between his prosthetics company, a weapons manufacturer, and several other shady entities. The overarching plot that eventually begins to surface throughout these 5 episodes is centered on a terrorist known as Pyromaniac, another criminal who is able to hack people's cyberbrains to implant a virus called Firestarter. This all ends up being a plot devised by the 501 organization and their leader, Colonel Kurtz, Kusanagi's former superior, or owner, depending on how you want to look at it. The Major takes down the Pyromaniac in the final episode of the series, but there's an ominous ending scene where Kurtz hints that she's perfected the Firestarter virus. These 5 episodes were recut in 2015 into the 10-episode TV series Ghost in the Shell Arise Alternative Architecture, which just split each episode into 2, making 10 episodes. I've read that there's new footage, but after being split in 2, the TV episodes' runtimes end up being shorter than the original releases, so I don't know. I watched both for this video, but I gotta be honest, I didn't watch them all that closely enough to tell what was missing and what was added. Arise's storyline continues in the 2015 film, which is called Ghost in the Shell, the New Movie. I'm not kidding. Even in Japanese, it's just called Koukaku Kidotai Shingeki Joban. Really put a lot of effort into that title. And yeah, so the Prime Minister is assassinated, and Section 9 forms an alliance with his son to hunt down Kurtz and her 501 organization and put an end to the Firestarter virus once and for all. Again, production value-wise, there's nothing really to complain about. Lots of good action sequences, it's competently directed, and it ties up pretty much all of the loose ends from the series. But that's the thing. While overall the plot of Arise is not bad, it's just incredibly forgettable. Already it's on a shaky foundation because of the new character relationships, but the whole pyromaniac and firestarter virus plotline ends up being bland. There's no weight to any of these events. It's all self-contained, mainly focusing on the government and these shady organizations within it. Which, I mean, looking back at previous entries in the franchise, the same could be said if you're purely looking at the surface level of those plots. But what the original manga, the earlier movies, and standalone complex did was focus on how these events and themes affect society, people, and their beliefs. Or at the very least, how they affect the main characters, like in Innocence, which ends up being a more intimate story. That's the dichotomy that makes Ghost in the Shell what it is. On the one hand, it's all high technology, cyber warfare, prosthetic government agents, terrorists, viruses, shadowy political intrigue. That's the shell of the series. But underneath, there's the questions about the nature of humanity and the self, the philosophical conundrums of such a technologically focused world, the toll all of this has on society and the people who live in it. That's the heart of the franchise. The ghost, if you will. Arise misses that element completely, and it feels like a shell without a ghost as a result. Sorry for taking that metaphor so far. It's a stupidly easy one to make, but it works, so meh. A lot of critics in their reviews have said that Arise is a worthy addition to the Ghost in the Shell franchise, but I have to disagree. It's not bad. You can probably sit down and enjoy it for what it is. A sleek, fairly entertaining slice of cyberpunk storytelling, but it comes nowhere near the heights the rest of the franchise is known for. I don't know if the creators had hopes to continue the Arise timeline after wrapping up the Firestarter story, but that never happened. Sometimes an entry in a long-running franchise comes out and is a bit controversial or not accepted at the time of its release, but then after time passes it starts to be appreciated more, looked at on its own merits and re-evaluated. But in Arise's case, as time goes on and other entries in the franchise have come, hindsight has shown it to be a reboot that ends up going nowhere. It ultimately makes Arise feel pointless. As for some other Arise media, leading up to the release of the film, there was a short VR episode called Virtual Reality Diver, which was available on both the App Store and Google Play. As far as I can tell, it seems to have been delisted from both stores. Also in 2015, there was the Ghost in the Shell Arise Ghost is Alive stage play. And not the only stage play the franchise would see. It ran from November 5th to the 15th, and reportedly it incorporated 3D projections along with live actors. But that's about all I could find out about it. In 2017, a virtual reality arcade game, Ghost in the Shell Arise Stealth Hounds, was released in Bandai's VR Zone in Shinjuku. VR Zone permanently closed in 2019, so that's long gone. Again, all we have is a promo released by Bandai, which mostly just shows a bunch of nerds running around an empty room in VR gear shouting at each other. It also tells us to see the sound, so it seems like that was some kind of core gameplay concept. I'm not gonna lie, it looks pretty shit. A couple more things to add to the mass grave of lost Ghost in the Shell media. But yeah, 2017 is it? Well, there was another big Ghost in the Shell release that year. Let's talk about the Ghost in the Shell live-action film. I've already hinted at how I feel about this film way back near the beginning of the video, but let's really dig into it. The film's legacy is forever going to be the controversy surrounding the casting of Scarlett Johansson in the role of the Major. The movie tries to sidestep this by making the Major at first seem like a different character, Mira Killian, instead of Motoko Kusanagi. But we'll see how that plays out. Beyond just the whitewashing accusations, though, the film doesn't really build itself on any of the franchise's foundations. Directed by Rupert Sanders, written by Jamie Moss, William Wheeler, and Aaron Kruger, the four of them must have watched the original Ghost in the Shell and Innocence with the sound off. And maybe even with blindfolds on, because visually this film steals from Blade Runner and The Matrix more than anything in the Ghost in the Shell franchise. And Ghost in the Shell was one of the key inspirations for The Matrix, so it's like the snake that eats its own tail. Holographic advertisements, neon, brightly colored cityscapes, slow motion action scenes. It just doesn't really feel like the Ghost in the Shell world. It pays a lot of lip service to Ghost in the Shell in the form of plot points and even shot-for-shot remakes of certain sequences from the 1995 film. They take from Innocence with Bato's love of dogs and a basset hound named Gabriel, and the main antagonist's name is Hideo Kuze, the refugee leader from Second Gig. But anyway, all of this is just pandering, and only serves to highlight the film's lack of an identity. Just like in the 1995 film, we see the Major's body being built. We're told she's the victim of a terrorist attack on a boat that left her family dead. She needs to take special medicine due to visual hallucinations, signs of her brain rejecting her full prosthetic body. Her shell, as the characters in the movie love to remind us as the term used for prosthetic bodies, was built by Honka Robotics, who sold her out to a counter-terrorism unit of the government, Section 9. The gang's all here. Bato, Togusa, Ishikawa, Saito, Boma, Ladria? Look, I don't mind the gender swap, but couldn't they have kept the name Paz? It's just a code name after all. Why is Paz the only one not to be part of the team? Beat Takeshi Kitano plays Aramaki, which, I mean, it's always good to see Beat Takeshi. I like the decision to have some of the Japanese actors speak their original language, but why don't some of the other actors speak their original language then? If what they're getting at is this world where cybernetics allow people to instantly translate. Bato could speak Danish. Dr. Ouellette at Honka Robotics, who oversees the Major's care, could speak French. Yeah, it's a mainstream Hollywood film, can't have too many subtitles, but still, it just makes the choice to have some actors speak in Japanese feel like pandering again. Like, yeah, this is based on a Japanese thing and we know it. Some of our actors speak their lines in Japanese. And I have to say it, I really can't stand Scarlett Johansson's performance here. She gives the Major no personality. Her robotic way of speaking and lines like, "This is what I was built for. I wasn't built to dance." Like, she's human. She still has her original organic brain, even though she's a full cyborg. So why does she act like a robot? The script is written like the Major doesn't understand human emotion, and Scarlett Johansson plays it that way. You could argue her character has had her memories stolen and she's drugged up, spoilers, and she's just a tool of the organizations that put her brain in a prosthetic body, but I feel like there were subtler ways to convey her character's feelings of being controlled. And by the way, I think Scarlett Johansson is a great actor. She's amazing in Ghost World, Lost in Translation, Under the Skin, a movie where she plays a man-eating alien disguised as a human, has her acting more human than she does in Ghost in the Shell. She's also always falling for traps and getting caught by bad guys, and cattle prodded. There are 2 separate occasions where the Major gets cattle prodded by bad guys. Was this like a Rupert Sanders fetish? The film ultimately ends up focusing on the Major not understanding herself and going on this personal journey of self-discovery. The most cliched Hollywood plot you could ask for. It's the only way us dumb American audiences could ever understand Ghost in the Shell's themes of identity. Kuze is targeting anyone at Honka Robotics who worked on Project 2571, a nod to Project 2501 in the original movie. At one point, a couple of garbage men are used to attempt to take out the doctor who monitors the Major. So here we go with that whole sequence from the original film. They're doing some scenes shot for shot, but did they study the structure of this sequence and understand the pacing and what it was all leading to? Let's find out. We're introduced to the garbage men as they sit in their truck eating bags of spaghetti like Charlie Kelly. Yeah, we're off to a good start.
What is your spaghetti policy here?
These two are under the control of Kuze and attempt to assassinate Dr. Ouellette. Section 9 intervenes, and this is the part of the movie that attempts to recreate the most shots from the original film. And they do that, but it just ends up feeling so out of place. Rupert Sanders is not Mamoru Oshii. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the interrogation scene after they arrest one of the garbage men. First of all, what is this Hannibal Lecter-esque glass box they've got him in? Why? Then they shoehorn in the whole daughter subplot, and it's the laziest attempt yet to call back to the original film. All of the setup and payoff that builds throughout that entire sequence of events, from the garbage man's introduction to the revelation that his memories are false, is completely lost. If you're going to cover someone else's work, at least put some effort in so it isn't so clear to see how obviously shit you are. And I can see the arguments now. But this movie is trying to tell its own story and create its own Ghost in the Shell world. Well, if that's the case, why even try to recreate these scenes in the first place? Why not just go off and do your own thing? You're just inviting these comparisons by trying to make certain scenes so similar. But the lowest blow is saved for the end. The Major eventually learns that the visual anomalies she's seeing are not caused by her brain rejecting her prosthetic body, but are residual traces of her memories that Hanka have been attempting to erase. The medication she's been taking is meant to suppress these memories. Turns out Hanka Robotics conducted a purge on refugees living in what's known as the Lawless Sector. Hideo Kuze, a young Japanese man, was captured by the invading corporate military force, as was a young Japanese woman named Motoko Kusanagi. The revelation that Mira Killian is actually Motoko Kusanagi, and the purpose of Hanka's Project 2571 is to implant foreigner brains into their white prosthetic bodies, is such a slap in the face. Who knows if this was the original vision of the film, or if it was a tone-deaf attempt to address the whitewashed casting allegations. But either way, it sucks. It's just so dumb. The Major fights a tank. We see the Major's body breaking apart while attempting to pry the hatch off the enemy tank. Of course, they don't brain dive into each other because Kuze isn't the puppet master, so Hanka just kills him because, The Major survives thanks to the rest of Section 9. Aramaki kills Hanka's 2571 leader because what would a film with Beat Takeshi in it be without him firing a gun at some guy lying on the street? And Motoko goes to visit her mom. And the ending shot is the Major disappearing into optic camo while falling from a building. And that's the live-action Ghost in the Shell movie. All I can say is...
Crap, crap, crap! Crap, crap, crap! Crap, crap, crap!
Yeah, I don't think there's anything redeeming about this film. It's a complete waste of time. Watch the original. Watch Standalone Complex. Watch Arise. Hell, play the Standalone Complex PSP game. It's hard to imagine the franchise sinking any lower, right? Right? This whole video I've been avoiding saying the abbreviated Standalone Complex title, even though it was used before in the second season of the TV series. But here, it just seems appropriate to call this new series SAC. At first, it seemed like a dream come true. After almost 14 years, Kenji Kamiyama was returning to direct a new entry in the Standalone Complex series. We were finally getting the long-awaited third gig. Sure, it wasn't called Third Gig. It was announced as Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, or SAC 2045. But still, going back to a familiar, popular, highly acclaimed era of the Ghost in the Shell franchise seemed like a blessing. Then we learned that it wouldn't be 2D animated. They were opting for 3D animation. Okay, well, Japan doesn't have the greatest track record when it comes to their skill at pulling off that style of animation, but if anyone can do it, it's the Standalone Complex team. Production IG's got this. Then we saw the trailers. Ugh. But we've still got Kamiyama. Shinji Aramaki is also directing. Dai Sato is returning to write a couple episodes. None of the other original writing staff from Standalone Complex are returning. Neither is Yoko Kanno for the soundtrack. But this new crew knows what they're doing. It'll be fine. 2 12-episode seasons. One airing in 2020, the second in 2022, for 24 episodes total. What could go wrong? So yeah, anyone with eyes can see how shit this looks. The low detail, awkward movement, Aramaki with his ice cream hair. I could harp on the presentation all day long, but it's not going to change anything. So, let's examine this series' story. Does it hold up to the excellence of its 2 previous seasons and made-for-TV movie? Will it tackle some of the character drama that seemed to be set up at the end of Solid State Society? Well, it starts off with the members of Section 9, minus Togusa, driving through the desert on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Section 9 was disbanded about 6 years ago, and since then they somehow ended up in America, working for a private military contractor called Obsidian. Togusa has found work as a cop for hire back in Japan. Oh look, the SAC staff watched the live-action film and added all the stereotypical hologram advertisements. Great. And Aramaki is still kicking around the government. The first few episodes primarily follow the ex-Section 9 members who are now called Ghost. We also learn several background details about the current state of the world. About a year before the events of the series, an event referred to as the Synchronized Global Default occurred, which erased individual and national debts, but also caused hyperinflation, so no one had any debts anymore. Yay. But their current earnings and savings became worthless. Yay. The only people who managed to get through this unscathed were the elite 1%ers of society. To prevent a complete global economic collapse, corporations and governments instigated a sustainable war. Continuous small conflicts and skirmishes across the world that would drive military spending and keep economies afloat. The only benefactors of this sustainable war were, of course, the 1%ers. The rebels who fight against these corrupt governments and corporations are unknowingly backed by other corporations, so their ideologies of revolution against the elite are being funded by the elite, who continue to line their own pockets while the rest of the population suffers. Ordinary people have chosen to have their own prosthetics imbued with ads to earn at least a little bit of money in order to live. So this seems like a great setup for a larger narrative revolving around these ideas. And when the series focuses on these topics, it's at its best. Wealth disparity is a very topical theme for a series like Standalone Complex to explore. Unfortunately, after the first couple episodes, most of this becomes background noise as SAC 2045 shows its hand and reveals what it's really interested in focusing on over the course of the next 22 odd episodes. Here's what happens. The ex-Section 9 members end up being captured and forced to perform a covert mission for the American National Security Agency by its leader, John Smith. Excellent. Their mission is to infiltrate the mansion of robotics entrepreneur Patrick Huge. These names are incredible. However, when they enter the mansion, they find Mr. Huge is no ordinary human or cyborg. He's something else entirely. Able to move at superhuman speed and hack the elite military hardware the ex-Section 9 members are equipped with. Their mission is to capture Huge alive, but they're forced to kill him. Whether they succeeded or failed their mission is of no consequence to John Smith, whose plan all along was to terminate Section 9 once the mission was complete. However, Aramaki intervenes. He's been tasked by the current Prime Minister to rebuild Section 9. Unfortunately, we don't have Kayabuki anymore. Now we've got a half-American, half-Japanese man named Chris Otomu Tate. And this could actually be an interesting opportunity to explore tensions between his Japanese heritage and duty to the country he leads and his American heritage. The series has previously explored tensions between Japan and the American Empire. But yeah, SAC 2045 doesn't really touch that. Outside of Tate offhandedly mentioning he wants to get into the good graces of the American Empire. And Tate here gets practically no character development. So he tasks Aramaki with putting Section 9 back together. And though the PM believes anyone will do, Aramaki insists his former team was what made Section 9 the effective force it was. He plucks Togusa from his private police job and sends him to LA to track down the rest of the team. Once he learns they're on a suicide mission, he enlists the help of the PM to get the president of the American Empire to intervene directly in the NSA's operation. Now officially reformed, Section 9 demands to know what the deal with Patrick Huge was. Smith reveals the entrepreneur was a post-human, and according to him, there are 13 other post-humans who have been identified around the world, after another one, known as Gary Hartz, whom the NSA has captured and placed in a secret lab, uses his abilities to hack the facility's security system. The NSA's prerogative turns from capturing post-humans to eliminating them. 3 post-humans have been identified in Japan, so Section 9 returns home to start hunting. And this is the main storyline for both seasons, at the expense of pretty much everything else. We don't even get any character development for the main cast. There are no episodes that focus on their individual lives, like we got sometimes in the first 2 seasons of the show. In fact, in the first episode, we learn Togusa has gotten divorced, so no more growth for him, examining how he balances his normal family man life with his dangerous job as a member of Section 9. I'm not happy about the divorce detail, but they could have done something with that. His wife and daughter played minor, but at times pivotal roles in earlier parts of Standalone Complex. There could have been some drama to squeeze out of a scenario like that, but that's just too hard to write. Storylines where we tackle the socio-economic issues facing the world we've created are too hard to write too. Instead, let's just focus on these easy-to-understand, personality-less post-human antagonists. The writing and storytelling are such glaring downgrades in quality from what came before. Honestly, the only decent episode is the 7th one, where the team has just returned to Japan. Bato heads to a bank and gets entangled in a robbery in progress. The criminals end up being an inept group of senior citizens. The global default and currency conversion has made their life savings worthless, and thanks to hyperinflation, they can't afford to live. So they've resorted to robbing the bank, whose manager has duped them into investing in a phony cryptocurrency scheme. It's an interesting scenario and actually has a human element to it, looking at how this whole global economic crisis has affected normal people. I wish there was more of this. I can't praise this episode too highly though, because it also introduces the absolute worst thing about SAC 2045. Probably the worst thing in the entire Ghost in the Shell franchise. The new Tachikoma maintenance supervisor, Purin Ezaki. This character should be labeled as a hate crime. The creators of this show hate us. That's the only way to justify her existence. Her design is completely at odds with the rest of the cast. She does these F-tier idol group hand gestures and movements. Her personality is nagging and annoying. She's obsessed with Bato to the point of insufferableness. We already have goofy comic relief characters with the Tachikoma. We don't need this. I don't understand this character type that Japanese media often tries to shoehorn into established franchises. This nerdy otaku archetype that's meant to be a stand-in for the fans or something. Nobody likes this. Stop doing this. Just stop it, Japan. The worst part about Ezaki is she ends up becoming the focus of the story as it goes on. In some of the second season episodes, she gets more screen time than the core Section 9 members. And unfortunately, she's not the only character that feels completely out of place here. Near the end of the first season, we meet high schooler Takashi Shimamura in an episode appropriately titled Edgelord. I don't know if they meant that ironically, but he turns out to be one of the post-humans and ends up becoming the main antagonist in the second season of the show. What are we doing? We already had a great setup to this world. The entire series should have been about the synchronized global default, the machinations behind it, how the 1%ers exploit the situation, how the sustainable war affects society at large. But instead we have these monster of the week style super soldiers. Who gives a shit about any of this? At one point, Ezaki is killed by the Prime Minister's security detail by accident, and my only thought was, good. But she survives, because it turns out she's a post-human too. We find out the virus capable of turning certain people into post-humans was created by a rogue AI belonging to the NSA. There's this concept of people becoming a hive mind collective called N. SAC 2045's lazy attempt at explaining its standalone complex theory connections. Some nukes are launched, of course. and Takashi eventually traps the Major in a logic maze and manages to connect the whole world together through this N network. So the whole deal with the posthumans was an evolutionary step in humanity toward a technological singularity. The Major breaks out of the logic loop that Takashi trapped her in, and she has a choice. Let the world continue in this new state, or unplug Takashi and revert everything back to normal, essentially resetting the world. The Major, of course, unplugs him. At least Ezaki doesn't exist in this world reset. So at the end, SAC 2045 tries to pull in elements of man-machine interface, attempting to examine the transhumanist themes in that story arc of the manga, but it does it in such a basic bitch way. The entire series is just a huge misfire. It's irredeemable, and definitely the worst thing the Ghost in the Shell franchise has ever produced. Even though it's not lost media and can be viewed on Netflix right now if you want to feel like you've been lobotomized, I think we should condemn it to the bottom of the Ghost in the Shell lost media mass grave. Please, just lose the master tapes. Erase the data. We don't need this. 2023, VR No, The Ghost in the Shell, another stage play of sorts, ran at the Tokyo Tatemono Brillia Hall in Higashi Ikebukuro. Just like the previous stage play, there's not much footage available, but there is a promo video with some nerds making up acronyms. In 2019, a collection of stories by Western artists and writers, titled The Ghost in the Shell Global Neural Network, was released. It includes 4 original new stories, and I haven't read this one yet, but the reviews I've read are pretty good. I definitely want to pick this up at some point. Also, in 2019, a new manga series began. Ghost in the Shell, The Human Algorithm, takes place after Human Error Processor, and before Man-Machine Interface, putting together more standalone storylines. Writer Junichi Fujisaku returns for this one, with art by Yuki Yoshimoto. The 8th and final volume released in Japan in 2024, and in English earlier this year. And with that, I have covered everything I can in the Ghost in the Shell franchise. It's taken a bit of a downward turn over the last 20 years. Oh my god, has it really been that long since Solid State Society? But a lot of Ghost in the Shell media is excellent. Some of the best art, animation, and storytelling that these media have to offer. A deeply complex, philosophical, and humanistic look at the ever-expanding, technologically driven world we live in. The franchise just seems to have lost its way in many high-profile adaptations that were produced throughout the 2010s and earlier in this decade. That's why I'm really excited for the new series. Finally, we're going to see the original manga stories told in an art and animation style fitting Masamune Shiro's original designs. Some people may bemoan the loss of the more serious look and tone of most of the franchise's best-loved works, but as for me, I feel like they've already done that, and those classic entries are always going to be there. The series needs to find itself again, and there's no better way to do that than to go back to its roots, while at the same time creating something we haven't seen in the animated Ghost in the Shell world before. I have high hopes. The net is vast, my friends, and so is Ghost in the Shell. Thanks for watching. And that is the end of the Ghost in the Shell retrospective. What a journey. Surprisingly, after spending hundreds of hours reading the manga, reading books, watching the movies, watching the series, playing the games, researching elements of all of those things, researching the stuff I couldn't experience on my own, I'm still not Ghost in the Shelled out. I could sit down and rewatch the movies or standalone complex. I never want to watch the live-action film or SAC 2045 again, don't want to play the PSP game again either. But if we ignore those things, I still love Ghost in the Shell. It's such a great world with great characters. I can't wait to watch the new series. But as far as the channel goes, I have other ideas for these big multimedia franchise coverage videos, and some people have commented and given me good suggestions as well. But I think for now, I'm gonna set all that aside and get back to covering weird, lesser-known games for a bit. At this point, I feel like an 1.5 to 2 hour video about an obscure Japanese-only game is a vacation compared to making something like this. But yeah, I don't know, it's another format to add to the repertoire. Anyway, it wouldn't be possible to take the time to make something like this without the support of my patrons and YouTube members, the Dungeon Dwellers that you see scrolling here on screen. If you want to join them, you can click the Patreon link in the video description, or hit the join button on this page to become a YouTube member. Everyone who becomes a paid member gets to watch videos a couple days before I make them public on YouTube. They get exclusive updates from me, they get their names in the videos, and they get access to bonus videos that I make from time to time. If you support with $5 or more each month, you get your name read out loud at the end of videos like these, Dungeon Architects. 2Password for Kids, 8-Bit Unicorn, and Owl, Andrew Cole, Arcade Pino, Atalanta D, XG 1992, Axer, Bad Baphomet, Birthquake, Bliblio Jones, Blu-ray DVD Combo Pack, Brendan Jamieson, Brian but on Patreon, KS Arcanum, Cliff Sovereign, Dan, Daniel Hamilton, Dan Persona, Darkest Abyss, Das Guru, David Bobadilla, David Carr, David Host, Dilatar Tepes, Deep Dive Stocks, Dirt Possum, Dollar Store DJ, Drama Thurgist, Draco E, Desurio, Duck, Dzian, El Jaguar, Elizabeth Nairn, Emmeline Payne, FM Kalash, Eugene, Faye of Whimsy, Famous Koozie, Fanar, Fuzzmosis, Garbage Person, Gloria Gordon, Half HP, Hibernia Scholar, High Food Court, Hollow Best Wife, Horace Rees. I'm starting to feel like most of my parasocial relationships are one-sided. Ian C, Insidious Bliss, Izzy Lexus, Jack the Nipper, Jan Callwait, Jared Bynum, Jared Carlson, Jay Chisel, J Bud Airline, John B, John Grave, Jose Baron, Joshua Ayers, JR Hurd, Jugemu Unko, Justin Darnell, Kale, Captain Ketchup, Kevin Hanley, Krizik, Kiowa, Lamont Atkinson, Lilium, Mira, Magic Circuit, Mateo Feo, Max Grosshandler, Maximus Brime, McGooliton, Meownarchy, aka Roxy, Mia Pace, Micah Powers, Miguel Luis Estrada, Mortags, Mr. Eater, Mountain Dew Nut is Bad, Dense, Wet, Hyper Sugary, 3 out of 10, Neck Out the Brave, Nick Wolf, Nightshade, Nini the Keaton, Nocadian, Nozomi Corgi, Opalin, Otteretto, Paul Fierce, Pazuzu, Persparkle, Prinny Dude, Razor Good Stuff, Rez, Richard Dante Sanchez, Richard Cutting, Richort 12, Roberto Hernandez, Rocket Owl, Rog U, St. Murray, Salvatore Toasty, SC Fade, Shannon Gate, Shivering Dova, Sigma Sim 69, Silatixo, Slowbro 96, Snarls Darwin, Supertramp, SY23BB No Eve to Fix It, Taylor Davis, Tenny Lava, That Uninformed Guy, The Plaff, The Stoic One, Tom Rolling, Tucky Ducky, Tyranny Frigate, Ultron Kick, Veyron, Venonox, Vexen Dagrin, Vinci, Volfram C, West Covered Wars, Whole Cloud, Willem Rosenthal, Winter Chunk, Zarin, Yoni42, and Zias Quinn, as well as these dungeon connoisseurs. 84D, 93R, Aaron Yeager, Abraham Moss, Ariman, Alberto Amatucci, Alex Nadeau, Alex Ranko, Alexis Faculde, Alice, Aliquem, Alan Williams, Amar Lynn, Ambrowski, Andres Chirino, Andrew Tovanidi, Engine 01, Anma Ofra, Annalise, Anthony Labella, Archaeolinguist, Aranai Sayes, Arrested Rabbit, Ashley Black, Athena Von Nacht, Oalai, Aurelianus, Ava M. Dumas, Azure, B. Saunders, Baron of Books, Battle Mage Nerd, B-Dubs 2000, Big F. Oshetta, Blue Mantis, Bryce Holder, Booer, Bunny, Keiichi, Kanzadu, Captain Doctor, Captain Swing, Cappyberry, Caramel Cream, Carb Kochun, Caroline, Cassandra M, Cat, Cat Soup, Casual Interference, Cerebral, Chalamari, Sherm Slurm, Chris Zappaslave Collins, Thonic Hermes, Chumpkins, Claim, Claire Myers, Cloudy Wizard, Clovo, Cohort, Cormac, Crassus Zero, Crismeow, Crippler Jones, Crooked Rook, Dale Walden, Damar, Daniel Morton, Daniel Tallow, Daphne, Days Clockwork, Dean Hubbard, Deco, Delilah Lynn Donk, Derek Whitted, Devin McCullough, Devin is my favorite human, Dr. Jellybean, Dr. Discord, Don Kung, Dragon Ace SG7, Dragos Butte, Dry Kentbrot, Dribdebach, Dungeon Heat, Dust Bunny, Edge, Enrico Amato, Eric Panonin, Eric Clapton, Ethereal Omni, Fangro, Feathered Scorpion, Fed Up and 5BAM, Flare Blitz Flare, Francine Bridge, Gary, Gaming Sucks 69 followed by 79, Scandalf the Gay, Gwynblade, Pokon Boyum, Harvey Bodega, Heartman, Hennius, I Found Your Dream, IR Sticky, I'm in Your Walls Drinking Soup, Icehammer 82, Igglemorg, I Love Misty 1985, Impending Doom XO, Indigo Happy, It's a Mia, Nekokami, It's Dizzy, Jay, Jack and the Candle, Jacob Havlick, James Chambers, Jason Cook, Jason Davies, Jay Jombles, JC, JDR, Jeff K, Gemma, Jeremiah Larson, Jetty Set Go, Joan Valise, Joe Gother, John Lithium, Jollybean, June Choi, Joshua Weber, Juniper Currybow, Kane, Karen Rosenow, Katharina Haas, Katie K, Keith Bastow Cox, Keywork Doggo, Nomadic, Knight VTuber Ragnell Avalon, Kano Queen, Critter, Quolls, Lady Nagram, Laney, Lenoodle, Limidgeton, Leonardo Shores de Souza, Leslie Dominguez, Dominguez, Liana, Lilecto1, Lin, Ning Chung Kung, Listens for Obscure Games, Long Arms 07, Lux Custodes, Mac Mothord, Macrophage, Man with Confetti, Matadat, Matthew Samael, Max Allison, Max Cohen, Maxwell Bauer, Maxwell Valentine, Mick Eldridge, Mephistopheles, Michael Carpenter, Michael Cesaris, Michael H. Prey, Midia Zabine, Midge, Mincemeat, Miss M, Molly Mellor, Monkey Kid 61, More Ink, Mountain Horse, Mr. Glizziness, Mr. Alpacleton, Mumbles, Nagatochi, Necroner, Nelno, Nick, Nick and SC, Oheimkai, Old Dead Lemons, Oleg 11, Olof Albine, Parapug's #1 fan, Powell S11I, Phil Bernard, Peepo, Please Keep Making Videos, Poofy, Rad, Ralabi, Rasmus Jensen, Razortail, Reaper Ezekiel, Refkins, Rezo55555, Rifflesby, Robert Z, Rodrigo Vaz Pina Cabral Silva, Rokoff, Ruby St. Dennis, like Sandy Nee, Ryan Scheffler, Sable, Samuel Sheena, Sarxis, Sashi, Savvyfav, Gorpix22, S-Dash, Sensei Wolfman, Sewing Savage, Chad is Dad, Sean, Shellac, Sherry Bowberry, Serbil17, Cicerin, Skyclad Weeb, Sleep Forever, Slycat, Solar, Someone Else, Sorbet, Sparkadark, Spencer Newton, Spencer Watts, Sumide, Surprise, The Fox, Susan, Sweaty Turtle, Sydney Schreckengoss, T, Tarask, Taylor Martin, T.Boogie, Teddy, Tennis Disaster, The Corsair himself, the dog from the Chinese restaurant in Mukojima, Kami Kang Gold Experience, The Beige Knight, Thief of 16-bit Technology, Thunder Mage, Tiny Gay Elf, Tor Dragon, Trothmoss Senator, True Axiom, Tuesday Twin, TV's Brent, A Cup, Umbra May, Unknown Relic, Upgrade Now, Vange, Venseer, Violet, Vixie, Volkendo, Voxel Rat, Weary Dromedary, Wee Wee Woo, Whiskey Dono, Wild and Horn Hermit, Wiley, Wanzer, Zills, Yami the Cute Bun Bun, Your Man in Japan, Zilta, Zorik, Nate, and
谢星球.
Thank you all for your support, and thank you very much for watching. The next video is going to be an obscure, Japanese-only horror game. A horror RPG, even. So, look forward to that. Until then, Ghost in the Shell. Check it out. Dungeon Chill. Out.